Here, because this has HDMI, yes, okay, so.
Commissioner Mack is absent. Chair Mesa is present. Second, Vice Chair Murray. Vice Chair Sanchez. Commissioner Schlatter. Present. Commissioner Stein is absent today. Commissioner Thomas is not with us yet. Commissioner Yap. Here. Before we begin, commissioners, Commissioner Mack asked me to provide a statement. She wanted to let the commissioners and the public know that she is sick today, and wanted to let you know that she would be watching the meeting virtually and will review the recording of this as well. Okay, sure. Yes. Commissioner Andrades. Thank you. I would like to welcome our host city council member, a distinguished guest, and an alum of the last charter appointment commission. That is Councilmember Jim Foster. Councilmember.
Thank you so much, everyone. Do a little sound check. Is that clear? Can everyone hear me?
Yes, sir.
Good. Welcome to the 1-5. I say it everywhere, say it to everybody, and I rarely get a chance to welcome so many people that are not from the 1-5 or in the 1-5. Although I never miss an opportunity to say, we used to be the 15th council district. We are no longer the 15th council district. We are the 1-5, and my wife, Pastor Connie, actually came up with this idea during the campaign. We are one district, 5 beloved communities. We represent a district that goes from Watts to the waterfront. And so those 5 beloved communities are Watts, Harbor Gateway, Wilmington, Harbor City, and San Pedro, the 1-5. And it does have pertinence for what we're trying to do in the charter. What we tried to do before, what we tried to do before that, and what I know you're trying to do. The reason why we call our district the 1-5 is because we are an example that plays out in our city's history and this city and this country over generations, over decades. That some people are haves and some people are left out. And in my district, in a microcosm, Watts can be forgotten. The Gateway can be forgotten. Harbor City could be forgotten. Wilmington could be forgotten. And I love San Pedro. I was born and raised in San Pedro, but that is the example in our district of the one that doesn't get forgotten. San Pedro may say, it used to be the city we're forgotten. but in our district, it has been historically and traditionally about 7 people. And what we do in our district, and what you do in the Charter Revision Commission, is remind ourselves every day, every way, that every neighborhood matters. Every part of our city matters. We remind ourselves, one district, 5 beloved communities, and we say it out loud to make sure we don't forget. And to make sure I get held accountable by my dear friends. I've got Athens on the Hill friends here. Make sure that we get held accountable for that very thing. So, welcome to the 1-5. Thank you so much for all of your efforts. It's not unknown to me how hard it is to be a Charter Revision Commissioner. A long time ago, I was on the appointed Charter Revision Commission for a very short while. Until Jerry, I was picked up by Jim Hahn to be his chief deputy city attorney, and Jerry Gaines, who's right there, came in behind me and fixed all the mistakes that I had made. And in those days, we had an elected charter commission and we had an appointed charter commission. And I will just say and leave it at this, that it was a deeply political time. Deeply political time, because we are in a political time today. But there was a lot more attention on charter revision then than there is right now. I don't know if we have other things competing with us that has caused less attention on charter reform. I presume that's the case. But then, because the then mayor Reardon put this front and center about what he actually wanted to do, it caused other interest groups to put front and center what they wanted to do. And the issue that you are focusing on today was one of the central issues. Personnel and employment, city family. And I will say, I'm not going to spend much time talking about it because you're going to have experts far better than I talking about it. But I will tell you that for me, as the son of a firefighter and the brother of a couple of firefighters and a daughter who's in city service as a firefighter, to get the cat in here. Fire department never calls me, I'm leaving this job and going there. Our city employees, to me, are not only the most important asset, they are the asset of the city. They are critically important. And on the personnel committee, we, in tough budget times, we have knocked ourselves out to make sure that we not only treat city family fairly and well as we can, but fairly is really what is demanded of us. And I hope that we use that measure. But also, we spend a lot of time making sure that we hang on to the city employees that we have. We're knocking ourselves out on what's called the transfer portal, knocking ourselves out on making sure that we don't have layoffs. We're very close to being able to say that we have virtual zero because the city labor partners have stepped up. And I hope that, I think management too has stepped up in fairness. To make sure that we hang on to everybody, because the best employee by far is the one you have. And making sure that we continue to value those employees, put them in a position where they continue to progress and provide the services. Because protecting employees is really about protecting the city, protecting our residents, because those are the folks that provide the services that we need. Now, all that being said, thank you to the coalition partners. Thank you to our labor partners. Thank you to our personnel department. I like that. Phillips is doing a great job. Looking forward to hearing as much of the debate as I can. But while I have the opportunity, I want to talk to you about some of my thoughts on charter. They're going to go outside of the city family, outside of the city employee base. I want to talk about the structure of the city, and I should start with the city council, because that's the body I'm on. And when we talk about the city council and the legislative authority, this is not purely executive and legislative, there's a mix of authority, as you know. But as we talk about the city council, I think two of the central issues are going to be the size of the city council and whether or not the city council is right size. And for me, it's less about the number of city council members who sit around the horseshoe, and it's about how many people do they represent. And right now, we each represent about 260,000 people plus. And I'm going to speak against my personal interest. My personal interest is that I represent the 15th district, and if you ever saw it, It's the only district where it's really, really clear. If the district gets smaller, I lose Watts. And I love representing Watts. But I will tell you that 262,000 or whatever the number is today is too large. And we have to grow the size of the city council. We have to add seats. We have to add seats because there are members, I think virtually every single 1-5 person and then some in this room has my cell phone number. And I'm glad you do. But it is unsustainable. It is unsustainable for one council office to represent 250,000 people, more than 250,000 people. And so we have to increase the number of council members and decrease the number of votes that we represent. And I say that with heavy heart. Because I know what I'm gonna lose. I don't want to lose it, I think it's the right thing. I also believe it's important to not make the council too large. And I'm not saying that out of selfishness. I do think it's important for the council, city council to be manageable. And to have power vis-a-vis the executive branch for the checks and balances. And so if you're gonna ask me for a number, I'm thinking 19 to 21, something like that. But that's for you to analyze to take debate on, but I'm telling you unequivocally, I think that council needs to grow. I think the other issue, we'll talk about city council. And there are reasons why charter revision commissions happen. 25 years ago, it wasn't really about whether or not people are connected to neighborhoods and we got neighborhood councils. It really was about whether or not the mayor, any mayor could manage the city and we got greater city council, mayor powers. I think today, it's about whether or not these districts are the right size. I think it's also, we've had so much crisis over the role of council, the city council in land use. And we need to address the land use challenge. The council members want complete utter control over land use. Yeah, when the question's easy. And when the question's hard, not so much. And I think one of the answers, I'm not here to say answers, I'm really here to throw out stuff. I think one of the answers is standing right in front of us. And it relates to the department, but more importantly, the councils. My boss, 25 years ago, Jim Hahn, began the charter revision process by recommending that neighborhood councils have land use authority. And it stared because it didn't exist. So normally you do what we were talking about. Now we know, with 25 years of experience with department of neighborhood development, more importantly, the other councils. I think that it's going to be important for us to take a look at the neighborhood councils and make a decision on what land use, not whether they get land use authority, but what land use role do they have to take that first crack at it, to have these decisions, to have this analysis happen at the local level, which is always best, and then have that frame, set the frame for where we go within the department. Have professionals within the department finish that frame, not finish it entirely, but you continue the frame and put guardrails on how much happens at the next level up. Well, that's the next level up. This could impact whether or not we have agencies. Area planning commissions were designed to do a little bit of what I'm talking about, and they're great. People serve on agencies are fantastic, but it was a patch to avoid giving land use authority to the councils. So I think we got to decide, where are we going to put this first local shot at deciding what happens in land use? Neighborhood councils, I say yes. Now what does that do to agencies? Not for adding additional layers, because you can have neighborhood council to the ADC, CTC, to the to the council. You have too much. You got to decide how you streamline that and how we restrain and guardrail for the council and can't do on land use without taking away the role of the council member to represent his or her constituents, who at least at last elections have been trusted with land use in part. So that's city council. I want to move to the mayor. As we talk about the mayor's authority, there's less for me. There might be a lot for you to talk about, less for me to talk about. I think we really did focus on the mayor 20 years ago. And I think that there are a couple of tangential things, having been in the mayor's office after the charter and implemented the charter, that I think are important for us to consider. And I'm going to say this Not enough time for me to say it carefully. I think we have too many commissions and too many commissioners. We just do. And I think that there are roughly 400 commissioners. The mayor's office inside the four walls, and they're not allowed to say it. I'm allowed to say it because I was there and I escaped and lived through it. It's really, we spent a lot of time analyzing and appointing and balancing commissions. And some are more, none are more important than others, but some are more absolutely necessary to the functioning of government than others. But we could not survive. Actually, we couldn't survive. We absolutely must have a police commission. That comes out of Christopher Commission and all of our reforms. It's absolutely imperative that we have a police commission. I think it's imperative that we have proprietary departments, DWP, Airport and Harbor, that have citizen commissioners, as they used to call them, who don't necessarily have expertise in that area, but have expertise in being community members and do the work in public so everybody sees it. But I think that once we get past that, it's not necessarily a charter reform issue. But I think it's an important issue for us to consider as we do all this. I think we have to make the government a little more efficient, and that should scare people, because efficiency also means doing things out of public sight. But there are commission actions that nobody comes to. There are commissions that don't have the attention, and they're not making decisions on contracts. And it's a lot of time and energy spent by employees of the city, frankly, that could be spent elsewhere. I'm not talking about laying folks off, but we have plenty of other things to do. I say that gently, but as a lead-in, we're following. We got to figure out how it works. The Public Works Commission is unique. It's a unicorn, and it's an activism in our city government. The Public Works Commission are commissioners who are appointed and under the charter work full-time and are paid full-time. And great, I appreciate that. I think that model has outlived its useful purpose. Because having a Public Works Commission means that we have bureaus within Public Works Department that are not necessarily speaking to one another, but more importantly, not necessarily speaking to the private works entities, planning and DOT and building and safety. And so I think it's time for us to consider whether or not we even have a Public Works Commission, and if we do have a Public Works Commission, we turn it into a commission like DWP, Airport and Harbor. It's an unpaid commission. And I think this is the moment when we consider collapsing the Public Works into planning, building and safety, DOT, and other functions that are related to planning. There are some in fire, for example, so that all of the planning for public and private works are in a community development hub. This is not a model that's unknown to us. The city of Long Beach did something similar. One of the greatest managers in city manager history, Jim Hankler, formed that. And I think it is a model to put us in a position where we can have a more competent, more comprehensive, more organized response to development, public and private development. Now I'm going to come back to public development in a second, but I want to move to the controller before I get to city attorney. When we talk about the controller's office, the controller, has responsibilities for auditing and for paying the payment system, and it is one of the things that doesn't exist in our city government is a chief financial officer. We do not have a chief financial officer. I would also say we don't have a city manager, but I think that's probably a little too steep. We very purposely, sorry I'm not jumping around a little bit, but I'm willing to come back, I'm willing to speak at any time. We don't have a city manager, we don't have a city manager form of government. The largest city manager council form of government in California is Long Beach, where the mayor sits as the convener of the city council and has the title mayor, but really is running the city council and working with the city manager on the effective performance of the government. I think it would be interesting to consider a city manager or someone who has who is at least a first among equals in the city management world. It's among the city managers, the bureau chiefs and executives of our city. But I want to put that aside for a second. I just want to say that not having a chief financial officer hurts us every day. It certainly hurts us every month when we don't have a regular P&L. We're looking at what money's coming in, what money's going out. How are we dealing with how to predict the future? We do have a quarterly financial management analysis, but right now the function, if someone were to say, I'm sorry, who's going? No. If someone were to say to us, who's your chief financial officer, I think a couple of folks are going to raise their hands and say, I'm kind of that. The controller and the CAO. But neither one is. Neither one is. And not their fault. It's the fault of prior commissions. And if it doesn't get fixed, it's your fault. I say that loudly. Why is the chief financial officer important? You just look at the integrity of the budget, the month in and month out, sort of functioning of how we're going, and raise the red flag and have the responsibility for raise the red flag. Because people in the building now raise red flags all the time. But if they don't have that responsibility, if that's not their job, then it's just another red flag. I think also it relates to the whether or not we have a capital improvement plan, a CIP. Well, if we have a capital improvement program that belongs somewhere, and well, first of all, let me back up and say we absolutely have to have a capital improvement program. We have to have a CIP. It has to be mandated. It would be ideal if it was mandated here, and it would be ideal to have guardrails on it so that it does get adopted by mayor and council. But in front of the public, in front of my ground, you say, "We're not going to do it." You make amendments to it, but you're held to it. We would not be in this 20-year saga of the convention center if we had a CIP. And we run from crisis to crisis, but financial crisis to crisis, among other types of crisis. And all of our attention goes to something convention center, I think, understandably now, but at the risk of everything else. I mean, where is the advocacy for sidewalk, streets, curbs, gutters, bridges, and convention centers? So we need a CIP, we need somebody in charge of the CIP. I think it does relate to who's going to be our chief financial officer, or it relates to who's going to be the head of our community development department. It needs to find a home, right? I'm going to move on to a couple of other things, and then I'm going to stop. But I'm going to commit to you that I'm willing to come back and I'm willing to talk to anybody anytime, anywhere. I care a lot about this. City attorney. I say this remembering that I was on the Charter Revision Commission, and then I was in the city attorney's office, and one of the debates 25 years ago was appointed versus elected city attorney. And I rolled out my best and most earnest arguments, and I shouted and I screamed and I slammed the table, and I said all the things saying it has to be an elected city attorney and an elected prosecutor, one of the state. I don't believe that today. I think it's going to be important for you to talk to our public and to consider an appointed city attorney, the corporation council, the municipal corporation of the city of Los Angeles, with an appointed council appointed by the mayor, confirmed by city council, with guardrails to avoid political interference. But I think that the appointed city attorney handling all of the civil functions of the city, representing the city in civil cases, filing civil cases at the direction of the client, which will variously be a department or the council and mayor, and doing all of the most important work, tracking ordinances and approving contracts, needs to be an appointed council. There's really not a reason why that should have the sort of political vagaries of everything from lots of the waterfront to Silmar or San Diego. And I think that you create a wall between the city, the civil lawyer, corporate counsel, and a prosecutor, a city prosecutor, a very important function that's elected. There are just all of the opposite reasons why you do want to make sure that you have no council of or mayor appointment of a prosecutor. We want a prosecutor to have independence and to respond to the voters just as a PA does. And so my recommendation for you to consider, appointing city attorney, elected city prosecutor, separate the two. Right now they're in the same office, and there's an ethical wall between them. but there's one person that sits on top of the wall, maybe a couple of folks, the chief of staff and the city attorney. And I know they do a great job of separating those ethics, but we can do it for them by having two different offices. I talked about city council, the mayor, the Department of Community Development, the city attorney. What am I missing? Anything? Listen, this is really critically important. I appreciate everything you guys are doing.
Councilor, if you may, on this one.
Yeah.
We're also looking at a 2-year budget cycle, but specifically, I would, I know this is of interest to you.
Yeah.
The timeline of that to give proper consideration to the public and to the council.
I thank you very much for bringing it back. When we, within the controller's portion or the CAOs, we're not having a chief financial officer, I was going to recommend that we actually institute a 2-year budget cycle. But we need a timeline of when we instituted initially.
And of the amount of time that you all get to consider, for the budget.
Oh, yeah. So today, one of the, so there's a few interesting, unique things about the budget. One is that the CAO has this really interesting role in developing the budget with the mayor. So the CAO office and that person in that function works for the mayor and works for the mayor's everything, which is actually a new trucker now, which is good. And is not working for the city council. I'm not answering your question directly, but I wanted to answer a few questions. I'm going to address a few issues. Is working for the mayor. And the day that the mayor by ordinance, by charter, and ordinance drops the budget in April, we have a very short period of time as a city council. One of the other interesting things is that the day that happens, now the CIO works for the council. And I don't know a solution to that problem, but it is kind of a problem. And so we have a very, very short period of time for our chief legislative analyst, we call the COA, to give us all of the analysis on the budget. And then the CAO, who doesn't necessarily have to work with the COA, they work together as professionals, is advising us on what went into the document and why. COA is her job is to look at the document and tell us whether there are things that are missed or misinterpreted or misstated. And to go from April 15th to July 1st or June 30th is really a short time frame. And so if we are on a 2-year cycle, by logic, there's a lot more for us to look at and think about. I think it would make sense to put the mayor in the position, the CAO, in the position of whoever works in the mayor, put the budget together to give it to us with at least another earlier by 2 months, 2.5 months, so that we have a fuller set of public discussion. Because remember, there is no public discussion of the budget until it drops on April 15th or soon after. And we are in a position, the uncomfortable position, that as a city council and as a budget chair, I'm not the budget chair, but I do sit on my committee, we hold 1 8-hour or all-day session for people to give comment. And they haven't read it either, it just came out, and public participation is critically important, but it's also time consuming. And so adding more time for the mayor to drop the budget and for us to adopt the final budget and have months in there to consider a 2-year budget, I think would be good for public participation as well as good for us to come up with better decisions, or at least decisions that are more in the light of day. Thank you for that question. Other questions? I do think that Department of Neighborhood Environment and neighborhood councils is going to be really important for us. If we go back to the first thing to give real authority, we need to also make sure that we're investing in it. We also need to make sure that we're not just investing dollars, but we're investing in the structure. It would be better, I think, what I'd be interested to hear from my neighborhood partner colleagues, my neighborhood council colleagues. It would be better to have a more uniform structure across the city, and understanding if you are, doing the Phillips 66 plant, renovation, and you're walking into 3 neighborhood councils, 4 neighborhood councils who all have legitimate interest in what's going to happen to Phillips 66. it would be ideal if it was apples to apples. If we understood the structure of each one of the different councils and how they process decisions, just like it's important to know how our council processes decisions. And to have all of that be open to public and to have that supported for us, kind of city family. So let's think about not just giving more authority to the other councils, but let's talk about the uniformity of how they reach their decisions.
Good morning, Councilman. Besides assisting with the planning structure, what other areas do you see, empowering the neighborhood council?
The CIP. Yeah, so if you think of the two sides of our built environment, it's the private works, what happens on the private side, how do we make decisions about land use? On the public side, how do we move people, how do we build stuff? And so I do think that the two most important areas would be weighing in on the CIP and the implementation of the CIP, as well as weighing in and not having final authority, right? I'm not for that, friends, but having some authority. And I think we moved off from there. Clearly, we have a 2-year budget cycle. I think there are opportunities to more formalize and advance what we have with the budget advocates, which is great work today. But how do we put a city in a position where the council doesn't have merely the responsibility of listening to a presentation for 45 minutes? The council meeting right before we adopt budgets. Other questions?
Yeah, another topic that's come up at a lot of our meetings is ranked choice voting. Do you have any thoughts or reactions to that?
I don't, and I just spoke to one of our friends. Oh, you gave me the card, but you gave your name, but I spoke to one of our friends on this. I've heard it in council and public comment sessions. I'm intrigued to know more, but I don't know enough to speak on it, and that's not a dodge. I mean, if you guys know me, I don't think dodges. I'm just not ready to say whether this makes sense. But listen to it. It's interesting. Other questions?
Question on city governance, council member. We're also looking at, with the current, the corruption scandals that have happened, which have been part of the city council, but the determines what happens to those members of the city council. What are your thoughts on the commission, the charter, what it says, and how we should move forward on that, since I'm chairman technically?
Oh, thank you. Thank you. This is a particularly difficult one for me. I was not on the council yet, but the council was going through all of its considerations and limitations on how it could respond and remove somebody from the city council. And then I observed from a distance what I thought was surprising, that council could remove someone and then the city controller, or not remove someone, the city controller had any kind of authority to pay or not pay. I do think that as a lawyer and as a person who cares about every job in council is a job, that it would be ideal to more clearly provide in the charter what the response to bad acts or perceived bad acts are, to clearly describe what the due process is for an individual member, should that member choose to pursue it or not. And then give the clear authority to the council with some sort of backstop. Typically it's under the court's right, but some sort of backstop so that they can remove someone. And then clarify that we don't have independent actors in the government, that the controller can't pay or not pay someone and effectively override or take away that decision of the council. I think it is important to have this happen in open public session, so I think it belongs at the council. And it's not like a lot of council members are going to actually speak by politics, but I, as a councilman, I will not be told to do that. But I think the benefit of the council doing it is to open the public.
Councilmember Oscar, I would like to say before we give you a much deserved round of applause, is that I'm really thankful for you having an honest and open conversation. I think it's really important for the public to hear where elected officials stand on charter reform, and I don't think all of your colleagues maybe feel comfortable for whatever reason to share that publicly, and so it is extremely helpful, it is appreciated, and I would love for everyone to give you a round of applause.
Enjoy your work and, short visits, long friendships, call me back when you're ready, and I look forward to coming back to you. Thank you.
All right, we will now move on to public comment. We do have translation available. I will ask our translator to come up and speak on that, please.
Buenos días. Mhm. Oh, sorry, I thought you were using that.
Sorry about that.
Buenos días, soy Leticia Johnson y permito en español. Si necesitan interpretación, por favor, vayan a ver los que les interesa. Basically, this Spanish interpretation is available.
I'm going to hand it over to our executive director to facilitate the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to call 3 names at a time. Please line up for the lectern at the front. We'll start with Lionel, Aaron, and Ray. We have this one, Lionel. Lionel first. Okay, go ahead. So we have one item on the agenda plus general public comments, and we have a maximum of 10 minutes. Which would you like?
Should be more talking about stuff.
Okay.
Yeah. Great. Hello, I'm Aaron Peter Castellan. I'm a resident of downtown Los Angeles, and I'm also the LA chapter chair of the Equal Vote Coalition. I was excited to see both star voting and ranked choice voting proceed as topics for the government structure subcommittee. So today I want to share a bit more. Star voting, voters provide scores from 0 to 5, that goes to ranked choice voting of voters, providing the first, second, third choice, etc. With the star ballot, voters can show their full and honest preference for each candidate, regardless of how many options are on the ballot. In addition to showing their favorite, they can also show exactly how much they like their next favorite, whether they're a 1-star candidate, a 4-star candidate, or even a 5-star candidate. The star voting method, the voter feels the same about multiple candidates, they give them both the same score. That means it's almost impossible to avoid the star ballot, and it also means voters can be as expressive as they please. If they want to give a nuanced opinion, that's great. If they just want to give vibes to everyone in the party, that's also great. I look forward to following your deliberation, and I'm always available in case any questions. Again, I'm Aaron. Thank you all so much for your visit.
Thank you. Yanda? 1 or 2 minutes.
2 minutes, please.
Mr.
I am already speaking as an individual, myself. I'd like to urge the Charter Reform Commission to take into consideration the suggestions and recommendations made by the Los Angeles City Ethics Commission, Fair Rep. LA, Mr. Rick Cole, former Deputy Chief Rick Cole, the City of Los Angeles, Municipal Neighborhood Council, and the Los Angeles Neighborhood Council of Budget Advocates like your recommendations. And I look forward to making our city work for everyone else in the city. Many people are depending on you to make our government better, more functional, more responsive. And I want to thank you for having this meeting. I would like to thank Tim McCosker for his lovely presentation. Thank you for being here, Mr. McCosker. I'd like to thank the personnel department for being here, the Coalition of City Unions, and Budget Advocates. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Ray. After Ray, we're gonna have Jerry, Godfrey, and Eric. So Jerry, Godfrey, and Eric. Ray, 1 or 2 minutes.
I'll take as many minutes as you're willing to give me. I'll take it to. Ray Regalado, one of the Northwest San Pedro Neighborhood Council. I'm president and former bond commissioner. and currently a Department of Transportation Commissioner. The importance of public participation is evident here with the amount of people who are here listening to what you all are gonna be dealing with. But here's the big challenge, when we're trying to do our work as neighborhood councils, 30-day public comment hearings just don't work. We need at the very least 90 days so that we can convene community, document community, and express their wishes. And as a commission, I'm sure that might ring true with you, but I'm saying that even across the board with the commission on currently, a 90-day public comment period is something that's really necessary for the neighborhood council system. Because it isn't just done on a whim. We look into the issue, and I'm going to use the example that council member McCosker used, the Phillips 66 project. 450 acres of redevelopment for a piece of property that has been used as a refinery, and they're gonna be repurposing it. And it's gonna affect the community, the harbor community in general, but specifically North San Pedro, Harbor City, and Wilmington. It's going to affect our lives, and we really need to be able, as neighborhood councils, to be able to take our public information and present it to planning. I'm gonna tell you, it took me almost 30 days alone to get planning, to get to listen to the fact that we need more than a 30-day public comment period on the NLP. What's gonna happen when the EIR comes out? But again, our hero today here, Councilmember McCosker, helped us get our 90 days. We need 90 days, and I hope we put it into the plan. Thank you.
Jerry?
Well, I should thank you for being here, doing this. I think you're the leader spot 20 years ago, and I took over for Tim. And we wish we had the wisdom and the knowledge that Tim just gave the last few minutes when we created that document, because we did not, we were kind of picky on that. But, Executive Director Ralph Schoenstein was our guy. And you guys really got to spend time, all his history, he knows more about everything than anybody else. Really love working with him. But I'd like to point out to you that the ingredients of this was based on the town hall concept and New England and St. Paul and Portland and other areas. We visited Greg Nelson, who was the leader of this, with his history when we did all this. And we had a lot of hearings all over the city. Well, the 99 different council districts there, and hearing groups. I would like to call community council rather than neighborhood council, because my feeling was the word neighborhood made it load up like it was residents that were against everybody else. My biggest thing was articulating the community array issue between all the stakeholders being on the same place. I think Northwest is just heard about. They've done a good job of how they set their bylaws up in different buckets. But Clemens is all that large, and it tends to be overloaded to different ways. But we didn't want to micromanage the level of it. Keep in mind that you're talking about planning, land use, capabilities, and so forth. But to be a member of a neighborhood council, you didn't have to be a citizen. You didn't have to be, elected, registered voter. It was community-wide entry. So when you're an advisory body like that, you gotta remember the framework of the laws that exist to bring that stakeholder package together. That was the root of the whole thing. The biggest issue I see as a co-operative is saying it's going to be how to set the table when you form neighborhood council. When local council people here, we watch the differences on how people get organized. We spend more time how to set the table than they do to put in the policies of the community. And that has always been a problem for me, because the educational piece has been so complicated, particularly with the way government's handled over the years and so forth. So I really would like to take another look at how the nexus between the community groups and the official government relationship is structured, it's in a guidance way where there still is a time, but there is opportunity, some stakeholder input, the community impact statements is there, but what's more teeth in that or whatever. But I think you heard from the councilman that the land use is dominating agendas in most areas, but the particular planning is complicated, depending on where you are in the city. Remember, we came about with the succession movement. We were, San Pedro were part of that in the beginning of the battle, when we came in on this whole thing. But I would urge you to take a look at how we approach the nexus of communications with, what Ray just talked about in terms of the actual activities of the council and what they can be respected for as they come up the line to advise policymakers. Because that's the key word, advisement, legally. And of course, people have to learn all these things when they come in the current demographics of the, communities that they represent. But it was been a privilege, and I wish I could have the councilman's input 20 years ago. Thank you.
Thank you. Kathleen and Eric.
Gazi Prada, LA Forward Institute. It's been a pleasure for our community members to start getting to know some of you, and we look forward to getting to know those of you we haven't gotten to know yet. I'm also glad to be in the 1-5. I went to middle school too much. One thing that has come up in our conversations is that there are aspects of the charter that before study session themes may not have been able to accommodate. For example, both community and some of you have expressed desire to understand how the charter lays out who has authority and oversight over LAPD. Who doesn't? How much authority those officials or bodies have or do not have, and whether that should be revisited at all. Both community and some of you have wanted to revisit who pays settlement costs for liability, the general fund or the particular department found liable. For items like these where there have not been panels, we're told that you as commissioners do have the power to make motions to agendize these topics. That is, you can say, I move that we agendize study of LAPD oversight to make a motion for unexplored topics in this body. I'm told you cannot just express your general interest, you have to make a formal motion. While we know that you already have so much on your plates, we hope that some of you will use this card words to make sure that our current modes of LAPD oversight and current protocol for paying settlements make sense in 2025 to you and the public. While LA Forward Institute doesn't have a clear platform yet, we've heard interest in this from our community and co-living spaces like RLA. And I'm told that Brown Beam LA, a different organization in the city, has also sent a letter to each of you highlighting possibilities for exploration as it relates to policing and the charter. Please take a look. Again, we hope you make motions to add this topic and others of civic interest to your agendas and to discuss these important topics in this body.
Thank you, Sarah. David Hudson and Carolina. David Hudson and Carolina. David, which one is it? David, what? One or 2 minutes?
Good morning, distinguished members, ladies and gentlemen. My name is David Ontiveros, I work for the Department of Water and Power. I am resident of City of Los Angeles. Just wanted to bring to your attention and request that you might consider charter amendment when it comes to article of safety for proprietary departments. My department, Department of Water and Power, we service the city of Los Angeles, water and power. We're a central workforce, and we have so much demand for new infrastructure builds that we just don't have the current availability to hire people as needed on demand. That goes through the civil service personnel department, which puts a lot of restrictions on us. It takes years, half a year, to be able to convince the personnel department to bring up a motion for a new test to hire people. And I think going forward, on the charter amendment, you should consider revising that application on how to hire people and move it to the proprietary department setup for the departments. The Department of Iron Power, Airport, Harbor. They have the internal capability to be able to hire their people and still keep it under civil service protections. It's critical to the development of the city of Los Angeles, to have an activity safe, drinking water, reliable power. And, we're always there for the people. When we had a disaster, the Palisades fire, we were there. We're out there 24/7 trying to get the city back on running. Everybody from administration down to supply chain services, we're providing the service to get the city of Los Angeles back. An honorable commission, thank you very much for your service, and consideration, sir. Now, thank you.
Ask for 2 minutes, but probably only take one.
Sorry, how long?
Good morning, Commissioners. Carolina Goodman, Legal Woman Voters, Greater Los Angeles, and a member of Fairfield LA. Fairfield LA sent a memo with a number of ideas that you would consider. I hope that you will take that seriously. One of the ideas tucked at the end of this memo had to do with police accountability. In March of 2024, City Council voted unanimously to approve a motion to advance options for police accountability. The motion was introduced by council members Tim Foster and Hugo Soto Martinez. It did not actually make it to an ordinance. There was a request to draft charter amendment language. City Council did not have the time to get that done and believe that our charter commission should take this up. So please raise this in your priority. It's an important issue. We need police accountability in Los Angeles. Thank you.
Is gonna be Nicholas and Lori. 1 or 2 minutes, 2 minutes.
Good morning, everyone. Hope you're doing all right this morning. My name is Hudson Lockbrand. I've been interested in different ways to vote ever since I was a kid watching YouTube. I came across ranked choice voting and I thought it was the obvious choice. But a few months ago, I was traveling through Oregon and I came across Equal Vote, a group that preferred star voting and other methods. And that got me thinking, how do we most accurately figure out who wants to vote for who? So I called them up. My walk away was, how do we most accurately find out what the public wants? So here's the way I think about it. If you want to know the best taco shop in town, you wouldn't rank them against every other taco shop, 150, you'd rank them 0 to 5. You would do this with a mechanic or any other product once Amazon or Yelp. You give them a score, not just a rank. And that's what star voting does. It's simple. The scores of candidates from 0 to 5. The top 2 automatically go to a run. Whoever's preferred, then head to head. The best part, star and ranked choice voting both agree on something. Automatic runs. That means big savings in time and voters, candidates, the city. For me, star feels like the clearest way to make sure every voter's voice is heard and that we're measuring candidates in the same way we measure everyone else in life. By score. Thank you.
1 or 2 minutes.
2 minutes. 2 minutes, thank you very much. Thank you, commissioners. I'll be straight to the point. We don't have a lot of time in this commission, but 1999 took about 2 years to do it. We've got maybe 8 months to do it. That makes it vital to pursue reforms that hit multiple birds with one stone. On this topic, in today's meeting, I'll let you. First, personnel. Our civil service system is outdated. By modernizing hiring through faster timelines, mid-career entry, and project-based staffing, we can make city government more effective, more diverse, and better equipped to deliver services just all around. Second, budgeting. A sharp requirement for multi-year fiscal plans, performance-based budgets, and a reserve minimum would stabilize city finances, prevent short-term gimmicks, and build public trust. Take 2 to 3 years, not just 1. Third, representation.
I have said multiple times about council expansion, but I believe that at a minimum, we should be looking at 29 members with an automatic ballot measure trigger whenever districts exceed 150,000 residents, so that people have a chance to voice if they want to expand further. Alongside that, we should adopt ranked choice voting yesterday. Today, these reforms make representation more local, elections more competitive, and outcomes more democratic. Fourth, neighborhood councils, they should be empowered. They should have a clear charter role in deciding certain issues, just kitchen table issues like street tree placement, alley cleanups, local beautification, and small scale mobility. By doing this, we can get more people seriously involved in our neighborhood council system, which is one of the easiest access points into our city governance, and to be able to seek higher office from that. It also makes elections more democratic. Finally, governance. I agree wholeheartedly with council members' points about splitting the city attorney, role. Appointing counsel and electing the prosecutor. This is professionalized legal advice to all who maintain prosecutorial independence. Each of these reforms solves more than one problem at once, which is the key here. Modernizing our workforce, strengthening fiscal discipline, enhancing democracy, and empowering communities. This commission is short-lived, which unfortunately is too short of lived. Let's make sure that reforms we advance are bold and structural and take big swings. Thank you.
Well, if there's anyone else left that didn't get a chance to sign up, please come up and stand. Otherwise,
Laurie Jacobs, proud stakeholder in the 1-5 San Pedro Neighborhood Council Homelessness Liaison and LA City Commissioner on Climate Emergency Mobilization. I'm gonna focus on neighborhood council and really appreciate all that I've heard about neighborhood councils. First of all, I know this is in your purview, but city council at times has allowed the changing of some of the bylaws in neighborhood councils, and the Department of Neighborhood Empowerment has two. Example is changing the age requirement for a youth seat. We were built on being individual autonomous neighborhood councils, and I want them to get out of our way and let us do what we were set up to do. And then I want to reiterate what we've heard a couple of times, Ray talked about the public comment period. Okay, when we had the Ponte Vista, we had a project which was huge, not as huge as Philip. We had to fight over and over and over again to get our public comments heard. Okay, neighborhood councils, we're a voice to the city council and to the mayor. Give us time to get constituent input and make our statements. I don't understand. I'm just saying neighborhood councils are getting no respect. Okay, and if the people given their time for free, okay, to volunteer, learn about what the community needs are, and be a voice for grassroots movements. So I'd like to see some changes, stop the oversight and changing things within the neighborhood councils. Let us do what we want to do, as far as setting up our bylaws and our standing rules. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chair, that concludes our part.
Thank you, everyone who provided public comment today, and for those members of the public who submitted written public comment as well. I would like to note that Commissioner Thomas has joined us. Next, I would like to see if there are any neighborhood councils with approved community impact statements. Seeing none, I'll move to our next item on the agenda, which is approval from the minutes of our last meeting. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Motion by Commissioner Sanchez. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Field. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing no discussion, is there any objection to approving the minutes? Seeing none, the minutes are approved. Thank you, commissioners. Okay, we now move on to the next item on the agenda, which is a brief report from our executive director on outreach and other matters.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. I'll keep this brief. We had a great presentation last week by City Fabric, and we went into a lot of detail. A lot of that detail is now turning into some adjustments and some planning and lots of scheduling going on. You'll notice that some of the first government structure committee meetings have been posted on the website. So we look forward to kicking off those committee meetings. And we also look forward to working with the rest of the chairs here in the coming days on scheduling future other committee meetings. So really excited about that. We also got our first full newsletter out this week. A lot of you probably saw that in your inboxes this week, and we'll continue to grow our leadership there. More social media will be added as well. Let's see. We'll be back at, I just want to note for everyone, we'll be back at City Hall this Wednesday at room 1010 for our next meeting. I believe that's at 6 p.m. Just a reminder, that's at 6 p.m. on Wednesday in room 1010 at City Hall. I'll also note that the outreach and engagement plan that was approved by this commission has now been approved by the Council Rules Committee unanimously. And next up, we'll be going to this full city council for consideration. Looking forward to that. I think that is the conclusion of all my major updates.
It would be cute, Malika.
It should be.
And should she like do it from here? And
I could have done.
It's the personnel one.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I will probably find out.
And then you could just say it, announce it later.
Can we find out how many people are on Zoom really quick?
Yeah, we had 26, but
26 people as of right now. That number always doesn't go.
Yeah.
Last week, I think we had a total of 55 people after all of us have done, were logged in. So, yeah. And then, met with the council member, this week, with, our chair. And they are actively still, talking to people and interviewing people and doing outreach to find, someone to fill that, last vacancy.
Thank you, Executive Director, for the report. We now move on to item 1 on the agenda, Town Hall Study Session on personnel. Comment and discussion on issues related to the management of the city's workforce, reviewing the structure, governance, and rules of the city's civil service system and personnel policies, fiscal planning, including assessing the potential benefits of implementing a multi-year budget framework and mechanisms for ongoing charter evaluation. I am going to hand it over to our Executive Director to introduce our presenters.
Fantastic, let's just get Jack up right in here, everyone.
excuse me.
There we go. Well, Malika, if you would like to, join us at the, lecture right up here. Malika Phillips is our General Manager of the Personnel Department here at the City of Los Angeles. We really appreciate you coming and joining us today for this presentation.
Thank you all, if you would, if you want, it's, happy to be here, and that means to be able to present. All right, so I think we have the presentation, brought up, thank you very much. Thank you, honorable members of this commission. My name is Malika Phillips. I'm General Manager of the Personnel Department. I'm a little bit under the weather today, so thank you for me. The Personnel Department, is one of the departments in the city of Los Angeles. I want to talk to you a little bit about what it is that we do. And I'm going to talk about personnel and the civil service system, personnel rules, and all the tricky, complicated things that go into maintaining a civil service and an employment base as large as we do here in the city. So the personnel department oversees an array of services. Sorry, you can go into. Well, that's the agenda. I'm just doing an introduction, so we'll get there. The personnel department oversees an array of services. And is connected to employees throughout their career. So we develop civil service exams, we onboard staff. We manage standardized HR functions for the city. We train employees, we oversee health and wellness, retirement benefits. We handle employees related to, issues related to workforce compensation, complaints, discipline, we do recruitment, we do hiring. And so it always, the personnel department and the personnel rules are connected to employees from the time that they are hired to the time that they leave the city. Through whatever means they leave the city. And so my job as the personnel general manager is to oversee all of those functions. But my mission, my personal mission is a little bit broader than that. It's not just to oversee the functions of the personnel department. It's to leave the city better than I found it. It's to make improvements where I see that there are opportunities for improvements. It's to make processes more efficient so that the experience of employees can be as best as possible. At least a different company. So today, what I'm gonna do is I'm not gonna dig deep into recommendations. Because the civil service rules and the civil service process is complicated, what I wanna do is give you a primer, set the framework, and I understand that I will be invited back to provide my recommendations to you, but I want you to have the foundation because it's tricky, it's complicated. I've been in the city for approximately 8 years. And I'm learning every day new rules all the time. So I don't expect you to understand everything that I'm supposed to know within a 30-minute presentation. So at the very least, before I ask you to change something, I will ensure that we understand it. There are many city employees here. A lot of you understand these things already, but I want to make sure that the commission and anyone else who's in the public has the level playing field to understand what it is that we're doing. So or what we do here in the city. So, I'm gonna give a little bit of background about what we do in the, not just the personnel department, but just some background areas about how the government in the city of Los Angeles is structured with respect to personnel rules. The background of civil service is not what we see everywhere in the state of California. California is an at-will employment state. So those work in civil service, it's different, and I wanna make sure that you all understand that. I also want to talk about the present realities, the present challenges, a little bit of the research I've done to sort of get an understanding of the present realities and challenges, and how I'm going through the process of forming recommendations, and then we'll talk about next steps. So moving on, just to give you a little bit of background and context for what it is that we're doing. There's a lot of things that are going on with charter reform. Commission, you guys are making a lot of decisions, but employment, employees. Our budget, our general fund budget is this last year was $8.17 billion. 75% of that is spent on employees, salaries and related costs. It is the primary lever that the city has to get anything done are the people who work for us. So for that reason, it's important that we understand the rules for onboarding and the employees and navigating their experience. So for government agencies, there's two types of employees. Most of our city employees, the city of Los Angeles, 95% are civil servants. The people who are not civil servants, we call them exempt employees. So you'll hear that term sometimes, exempt employees. It's similar to at-will employees in the private sector. And they do different things. So civil servants do things like that are like the real core functions of the city, including our streets, running recreation centers, processing permits, all the ways that the city engages with us. And they all have a formal job title called a class. So you hear the word class. So the formal job titles for the civil servants. And a lot of civil servants tend to work with the city for most of their careers. Exempt employees are more similar to at-will employees. And a lot of the people who fall into this bucket, all of the mayor staff are exempt employees. All of the city council staff are exempt employees. Council members are exempt employees. General managers like myself, often many assistant general managers are exempt employees. And certain specialists or experts in certain areas are also exempt employees. So they're very, very limited. So let me give you a little bit of background about civil service and why it exists and why it's important. It basically performs the core functions of the city. The system, the civil service system itself was established in 1883, so it's a long-standing part of the American fabric through the Pendleton Act. And the goal of the establishment, I'm sorry, you can move on to the next one, yeah. Tracy, you can kind of keep that moving, I'm gonna keep going.
No worries.
Let's see here, are we? Yes, this is why it's important, so really the goal of it is to protect, core functions from things like cronyism, which is actually cronyism and nepotism, political corruption. Things that were today as part of our political government, the things that we obviously wanted to keep out of the process. We didn't want people just hiring people to run these core functions, who were not qualified, who were just friends of the people who were in power. We didn't want to move the work of the city, and so what we created, or the system was created, was a system of stability, accountability, of fairness in the hiring process. So how it's structured. It's designed to be a merit-based system to ensure government positions are filled by competent individuals. And in order to establish merit, we created a testing process. And the testing process looks at the various skills for all of the different types of positions or classifications that we have. And the process must follow the civil service rules. Whether it's multiple choice test or an interview, or an essay, having standards of developing and administering civil service tests ensures a fair process and that qualified candidates are able to get through. The other thing that the civil service system allows for is job protection. Under California laws, the civil service employees have what we commonly call the city a property right in their jobs. It means that you cannot remove a civil service employee from their position without due process of the law. They get to keep their job unless you have established through due process, many procedures that are outlined that demonstrate what due process is. But those are some of the key parts of the civil service system. Creates public trust. And I think that the protections of the civil service system are vital, because it also can prevent discrimination in racial hiring, a very neutral process, hiring of staff who are not qualified, and firing of people without some sort of due process. So, moving on to the next slide, I want to walk you through how the structure of civil service kind of connects to all of the different documents and governing rules. So at the top, you'll see that civil service is structured in part by state and federal law that certainly governs aspects of civil service. I talked to you earlier about the property rights that civil servants have in their jobs that comes from California law. There's also federal laws that cover that. But the Los Angeles City Charter that we're talking about here has an entire section called civil service, and that's Article 10. Article 10 of the charter really governs the civil service rules, and that's where I'm going to focus a lot of my conversation as I talk to you over these next couple of interactions. The state and federal laws can only be changed by higher courts and government legislation, things like that. As you go to charter, can only be changed by a vote of the people. We also have employment rules in our administrative code. The administrative code can be changed only by the council. And that has a rules for implementing the charter, and some of those rules affect employment. We also have a document, 103 or something page document called the City of Los Angeles Civil Service Rules. And the civil service rules detail how the civil service process is implemented here. And the civil service rules can only be changed by voting of the Civil Service Commission. So we have a 5-member body that oversees and are responsible for enforcing the rules in the civil service rules. My role with that is I implement the everyday oversight of the system, but the Civil Service Commission actually enforces the rules, and so it's kind of work in tandem with the civil service rules. We also have memorandums of understanding that govern our relationship with employees. Some of those that are really impacted by the rules of the charter. We have, and all of the MOUs, memorandums of understanding, are changed through negotiation. with the city. And finally, we have personnel rules and policies which are changed by the personnel department. And all of these structures work together to create the system that we have. When you change some, it may change the other. When you change the charter, it affects all of these, or so it can affect all of these different rules. So new rules will have to be created, new pathways, new opportunities could be created depending on how you make changes to the charter. So I just wanted to lay that out, make sure that we're all clear on that. So I talked a little bit earlier about civil service, and then I talked also about exempt positions. It's important for you to understand sort of the nature of exempt positions in the city of Los Angeles. They can be hired, they can be hired through, they don't have to be hired through the civil service process. It's kind of part of what makes them exempt from all of the rules of civil service. They can be brought on just like people do in the public sector, and also be separated from employment, just like you say, public sector and private sector. Just like happens in the private sector, people can be hired and fired based on the will of their employer. There's a balance between both, and having both, I think, is very important for the city. It allows a little bit of flexibility for hiring for specific needs, and the civil service sort of operates as the core of how we function. It's important to note that exempt positions in the city of Los Angeles are limited in number, and to a certain degree are limited in scope. So I mentioned that 95% of our employees are civil service. It's because by law, by the charter, the number of sort of those specialized exempt positions are going to be limited. Next slide. So that's kind of like the big picture of the background of things. By all means, ask questions, because like I said, I've been there for 8 years, and I'm asking questions every day, and I don't expect to know everything after 10 minutes of chatting. I want to talk to you about how I've gone through the process, or the process I'm going through to ultimately get to recommendations for you today, because what I will be proposing, overall kind of proposing here, are changes to the fundamental ways that we do things here in the city, and that has downstream impacts on tens of thousands of people that work for the city of Los Angeles. So I want to make sure that if I'm going to make recommendations, I'm going to make sure that they are well thought through, that they're vetted. And so I want to talk about some of that process. There's kind of two paths. There's my sort of internal research. I've been general manager of the personnel department for about 5 months now, so I'm still relatively new. And fortunately for me, I have a fantastic team that's very knowledgeable, very helpful, very customer service oriented. And I've been looking to them to find out what are the things that they see, what are the challenges that our clients, whether it's our employees or our departments, are coming to us with, I heard, I think it was David earlier, who was saying, the personnel department takes so long, to do things. I understand you, I hear you, and you're not the only person who said that. And it's concerning to us. So I've been talking to my team about what have they done to fix that? How have they moved through the process? How have they made things better? But beyond just talking internally, I also want to look externally, look at research with other jurisdictions, talk to stakeholders, find out what's going on. So I talk a little bit about those efforts, so that you know that the recommendations that are coming from me are coming from not just whatever popped into my head. So externally, I'll say that we look at stakeholders. We've started to hold town halls with general managers to ask them what are their sticking points, what are their pain points. We've had town hall with our personnel officers, also sort of our HR reps throughout the city who implement the rules of the civil service process. Everyone's sort of kind of carrying out. You kind of get a sense of what kinds of problems do they have, what challenges are they facing, are there improvements that can be made. I've started conversations with labor, not for negotiations of argument, but really they hear things on the ground that I don't always hear. And so just to kind of get feedback, and what are you seeing, what are the problems? Also, the city of Los Angeles implemented a citywide culture and climate study a couple of years ago to get feedback from employees. And we're looking at those results that, have basically shared, employee sentiment on, what they think about the rules, civil service rules, how it impacts them, how it impacts their experiences. And also sort of a simple team of support for the CAO's office, the mayor's office, and my team, to do a little bit of research and best practices, reach out to other jurisdictions, see how other people do it, see if there's ways we can improve things. And we've gathered some information from there. And, lastly, what I want to mention is that we have, actually, kind of where I started, my team, I wanted to get a sense of what have they done, or what can be done to sort of make things a little bit more smooth. So I want to talk about some of the practices of the personnel department as employed to help improve things. And the reason I'm talking about this is because I want you all to know that the personnel department has worked, over a period of years in partnership with other departments in the city to expedite things. We've hit a point where it's harder to expedite things because we've run out of solutions. We have implemented anytime anywhere testing needs to be very fixed and rigid about where testing comes from. The rules for testing, the basics for testing come from rules in the charter. We've implemented online testing, and an evaluation management systems, a web-based platform to interact better with people who are seeking employment with the city. We've developed targeted low hire program in partnership with Tim McCosker and other council members who push for this. The TLH and Richard Scott, which is a really, really important initiative. We'll talk a little bit about it later on, but it has been a real going to our city because it's sort of like a navigation around its rules, civil service tools to really outreach people who are underserved by employment in the city of Los Angeles. We've also built out competency models to ensure that our tests or exams are really testing for what it is, what are the competencies of all of these civil service positions, just to make sure that it is a truly merit-based process. We looked at selective certification. Certifications is kind of a very city word, but it's one where it allows us to identify who is eligible for a specific job and how do we go out and reach them if they have a specific skill set that is specifically tailored to this, targeted job. And it helps us to kind of weed through candidates who don't have certain qualifications and focus on some of the others. So there are a number of processes that we've done over the years in response to departments who want the process to be either expedited or to really demonstrate stronger merit connections. But again, I just sort of hit it very before. We've also talked to other stakeholders, not just in the city, but outside of the city. City of Long Beach, San Diego, San Francisco, LAUSD, and we have an ongoing conversation about processes with the counties also. I want you to know that the city of Los Angeles processes 85,000 applications, employment applications a year, which is a huge scale. So in order to build efficiency, we have to build efficiency, so we're looking at those kinds of numbers. And we test more than 45,000 candidates. No other jurisdiction does that other than the city of San Francisco, city and county of San Francisco. So, next slide, I want to talk about what we found through our research. And essentially, although Article 10 and other areas of the charter talk about lots of different things, hiring seems to be the very biggest sticking point. It is what everyone complains about. It is the area that is the most in need of some sort of improvement. Ultimately, we've also found that stakeholders want a better process. That's engineers, that's engineers, that's staff, even that's some of the feedback that I got from labor and from employees. Creating some sort of process, doing something to make things better is part of it. And also we found that other cities do things differently. It doesn't have to be this way. Los Angeles, I know you all heard this before, we are unnecessarily complicated in some spaces, and hopefully what we need through this process is simplify things, and going back to the basics. So I'm gonna show you the opposite of basics. This is our current hiring process. I made it small for a reason. There's a lot of detail in here. You all have access to the slide. If you can read this, it's very impressive. But there's a lot of different steps from the exam request to the development of the exam to, actually running the test, to creating lists and serving the lists, and then it goes to the department. So I'm not gonna walk you through all the details, but I wanted to give this to you so you can see what this process is, and you'll hear people complaining about and saying, I just need somebody to sweep the streets. We have to have a lifeguard, for the kids in the park for the summer. I need, somebody to process this permit, because we have all these things, but look, here the city can't get people on board to do things because it's so long. We lose people in the process. It's not efficient enough. So it can take 3 to 5 weeks to review all the applications. Over 385 days from the department requesting the exam to the establishment of the eligible list, and that's the list of people that departments can choose to hire from. So what you heard earlier was exactly right. It can take all kinds of different periods of time. I won't go into all of this text, but basically the takeaway is that it takes a really long time to get through this entire process, and it's frustrating for a lot of people. So ultimately, when it comes to what do we need to do better, it's build in efficiency and flexibility. Slide. So we've set a precedent that, especially in exam scoring, in exam development, that has gotten to the place where we just don't have any more flexibility to give. It's tricky to hire at scale. We have an ever-changing job market, and the rules that are in the charter create rigidity. And we don't have the ability to change our process because of the structure of some of the rules. It's hard to lead in a dynamic world that does need some flexibility. Sometimes we have emergencies, we have societal changes, we have different expectations of government. We have technology that comes in and changes how we can and should be able to do these things, what's going to happen in the future also. And so sometimes we have skilled employees who end up having to leave our processes, who are working as we go to leave our city employment because of the bureaucracy, because of the way that we're structured. So our goal is to get to hire as many qualified candidates as possible, as quickly as possible, but as fairly as possible also, because that's not lost on me. The whole fundamentals of the civil service process is about fairness. It's about transparency and ensuring that people know what to expect through the process. So the proposal that ultimately I will make to you will lead to greater flexibility, a faster hiring process, and more, fundamental change that will allow us to create reasonable change in the future. There are also proposals that I will make, that are related to language that I don't think represents our modern values. There's references in the charter to unskilled workers, things inappropriate. And so we would make little change, I don't want to say little changes like that, but word changes like that. Those are the types of changes that I will bring back to you next week. So ultimately, can changes to the charter help us? I think yes, you'll see some words appear. There's terms like emergency appointments, exemptions, the promotion process, the testing process. There's certain words that are trigger words, I think, because they've been litigating so much to mean a certain thing that also defines and limits how we're able to interpret some of those words. And so changing that, I think ultimately is where I will recommend. Next slide. big picture, this is what I think the charter should represent. I think ultimately the charter should represent the fundamental values that the city has with respect to its hiring process, not so much descriptive rules. Because when you have descriptive rules in the charter, you have to go back to a vote of the people in order to make changes to those rules, especially where circumstances change. However, the values that we have for hiring, fairness, merit-based, competitive, all those things that I think that we all sort of hold dear as a civil service, system, should absolutely be connected to and committed in the charter. We do need to hire people faster. We do need more flexibility. Ultimately, the personnel department goes to the budget and finance committee, as Councilman Foster said earlier, we ask for more resources every year, but we are in a world of limited resources. And so instead of asking, next slide, asking for more money, or more people, or more staff, what I'm asking for is a more efficient process so that we can do this work without having to have or ask for a million people we can't afford. As the city gets bigger, and as we do more work, as we affect more constituents, we will need to have more people to do the work eventually, but we're not going to be able to get there if we aren't able to create a more efficient process. So ultimately, my next steps are to return to you all. Now that you have a basis of understanding, obviously, to ask me questions about things, in a few weeks with very specific recommendations for how to find the language in the letter, to change or remove it, or having to add it, so that you can structure a process that has the values that I showed you. And that's all that we talked about, but that allows for departments and for the city to create the flexible hiring processes in order to get the work of the city ultimately done. So over the next couple of weeks, I will continue my process of having information, having feedback loops with, whether it's our labor partners or our, city leadership. So that I can ensure that the recommendations that we bring are thoughtful. That consider the various options, and so with that.
Commissioner, Thomas Lewis and Field with you, Commissioner Thomas.
You mentioned values. This is not to you personally. What values? That's a rhetorical, that's what I'm saying. Because one of the things particularly, I was a part of a going study that we looked at the impact of Latino America. And the main impact was the loss of Black jobs, that the jobs have become Black. That is the situation today. And, there have been community groups that have been calling for Tom Bradley rule as it relates to city council. I find it utterly hypocritical for the city to claim, and I'm not talking about you, for the city to claim that they want this diverse environment, right? And that's what Tom Bradley rule, is kind of about, because Tom Bradley had one of the most diverse workforces. But yet they are not even willing to hire Black people. The city council isn't willing to hire Black people. Some of them, maybe it's changed since you brought up, but I guarantee you they don't have more than two, if they have any. And so this sends a very strong message. And so when I hear things like testing, I kind of hear anti-Blackness in that. I hear, the inability to lift people out of poverty, because if you're impoverished, if you're underserved, then more than likely you won't be competitive on the test, just something that is. And so, but I also see in terms of city services, if you don't hire people who understand the communities they're supposed to serve, or even care about communities they're supposed to serve, all of the work and all of your good intentions are mute. And so, and so my question is, how do we get at what I would say a crisis for the city and for Black folks who are leaving the city because they cannot access these jobs? And it's even more frustrating when we see wonderful people like you, when we see the mayor who's Black. And it doesn't mean that because somebody is Black that they have to automatically, we're not talking about nepotism, though it goes home. Be very clear. But we're not talking about nepotism. Why is it that no one is looking into what is happening to Black people as it relates to their capacity to compete economically in this city? It is just business as usual and hiring as usual. And I just don't understand why it is not a crisis. And so I would like, when you think about your recommendations, that you not be afraid to say, what are we going to do to lift up Black people in this city so that we won't have over 600,000 of them leaving, which is the current situation, and that we have the capacity to keep those out here and to move those who would like to come.
Thank you, certainly. And I will say that to your point, there's, like, you bring up a lot of, it's a layered question, and we're layered concern, I would say, they always have something. That's why I was. Yeah. And there's, and it's kind of tricky in this environment. I don't even ask me for an answer, like you just, when you hear my, my broad thoughts on it. It's a tricky environment because you also have realities of like historical underinvestment in certain communities, and that's I recognize that not everybody in this world does, but I certainly do. And I think that's part of you can always do better. But the idea of investing in communities that have been under investment is part of what I think we've been trying to do. We have not hit the goals, the broad societal goal, but, certain things like the targeted local hire program, certain things like approach to jobs, really is about targeting communities and people who have not had a pathway to city employment in the past, and to say, you know what, this is a person who, because of their economic conditions or because of, like they've been justice impacted or something like that in the past, they can go to city employment opportunities through a path that is not required that they have an uncle and a mom that work for the city already and already had that history. So those are the pathways that we are looking into. Again, we haven't hit our goals yet, but that is definitely part of the mindset of, I think, of the city, of the personnel department, of the people who I'm working with, and actually those pathways were partnerships with labor, where everybody thought, you know what, let's find a way to circumvent the regular process. It really was a big feat, I think, for the city to like build these programs, in order to recognize there are opportunities that we need to be able to give to people who aren't easily able to navigate through the bureaucracy of the city. So part of the values, but I'll look into thinking about how to incorporate that in a broader sense too.
And I just think it's important, if you haven't noticed, I lead with race. And the reason that I do that is that it never makes it to the table. And so there's a lot of colorblind talk that actually does more damage than good. And so if if we don't begin to look at how the things that we do, how city services and how this city impacts the different demographics of this city, then we'll always be in the place where we are now. And so, I would just, again, I would just encourage, I know it's probably difficult in the current political environment, but I'm very interested in someone explaining to me where the Black people go and why. I just think it's important. I mean, how is it that more than half of the black folks have exited this city and nobody's talking about it? And the anti-black hate just is increased exponentially, and no one's really talking about it. It happens in city channels. I'm in the list to be president, I get complaints. And so I just wanted to just kind of throw that out, and make sure that is said, and to the commission. Can we not next time have our backs to we just done that? Okay. I don't know. This happened, I know. I'm just saying.
Commissioner Lewis.
Thank you, Brian, that I'm saying, okay, I got it. Thank you for the presentation. I learned a lot, and I know there's a lot more to learn. You mentioned that it takes well over a year, the hiring process for the civil service.
Okay, sometimes it's us, but.
Okay.
No.
Well, I know this might be premature, because I know you have recommendations coming our way, so. About how long does it take typically, for the executive hiring process? And is there any way to model or mirror that process on the civil service side in terms of time running at all, or just some preliminary thoughts, like a preview to your recommendation?
Well, I don't know that there would be that's not a huge recommendation. I'll just tell you, my thoughts in response to that. I don't know if we have any real way of measuring like how long it takes for an extended hiring process, but really as long as that department or that hiring person, wants us to take. There are some things. Okay, so it's gonna get a little bit into the weeds, so I'm gonna spare you most of the details, but there are two, I think, different ways. We have a limit right now of 150 exempt positions in the city. That's what's in the chart. 150. So in order to use one of the exemptions, we have to get permission from the mayor's office, because our people just hoard all, the exemptions themselves. So you have to go through a little bit of a process, and so that's, I think, most Oh, absolutely, yes, exactly. That's true. You have to go through the mayor's office and the personnel. That's right. I don't think I'm still a little new, so there's still some processing. So you go through the mayor's office to approve it, and then it goes through council. So that is, that's gonna take some time, however long it takes for, the project will be personnel and hiring committee to get it scheduled. But, it could probably be as fast as a month, 45 days, something like that, maybe even less. It just depends. But that's it. The interview process itself, you identify, I know Commissioner Murray is a great lawyer, and I want her to come on board and do this, work for me. And so, hey, as long as I can get through the process, I can just identify someone that I know. Usually departments go through a process, they try to, hire someone, but if they have something specific they kind of do, we identify the person. It just kind of, sort of depends. So whether or not that can be applied to the civil service process, that's kind of why I went through the background of like, what the differences between civil service and exempt. It really is built on the concept of warrant and a competitive process. Like I said, I could just pay somebody for an exempt, position. With full disclosure, I am the general manager of the exempt position. I have only been in exempt positions in my experience in the city of Los Angeles. I am not a civil servant. I came into the city attorney's office. And I just went through the hiring process. It just said, city resume in, they reviewed the resume, they interviewed me, I went through a process that I hired, that took 30 days.
Thank you for that.
Sheriff Field.
Thank you. What a wonderful presentation. Thank you. So well organized and a great overview of what else you'll bring to us. I'm hoping, I think I might be on the right committee to hear from you again in that committee and look forward very much to the specifics. But this was a terrific introduction. Two questions. One, when you laid out sort of, federal and state and the charter, etc., you used the phrase MOU, memorandum of understanding. Is that the equivalent of the word labor contract?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes, sir.
I just wanted to make sure.
That's one of the city terms.
Oh, okay, so the contracts are all MOUs.
Yes, they're memorandums.
Okay, they're a little different than where all I come from, but one other question, I wonder if any of these personnel rules apply to people who are neighborhood council members?
For the most part, no. Because, okay, and I know this is a tricky dynamic, because when I was in the city attorney's office, previously when I was at personnel before, I understand the sensitivities of it, but the way that the employment structures work, for employment purposes, neighborhood council members are considered volunteers. I know they're elected, other bodies, but for, the employment laws, see them differently. And so to the extent that, personnel policies apply to them, like for example, our, workplace equity policy, which is essentially our discrimination and harassment policy, it does apply to neighborhood council members. Because if we are bringing people as a city into our fold, like having them to perform work for us, then, there's a potential or risk, for potential liability if they do something outside of what we allow within our purview, allow them to engage with each other in a way that's harassing or inappropriate in a way. So our workplace equity policy, that's the hiring process, we certainly know the process.
She wants it to take a PowerPoint on here. No, if I have PowerPoint. Oh, really? Yeah.
So just for clarity, meaning neighborhood council members, the one place.
That sounds cool, sure. I probably would have to open it up on. Thank you. And it's the one without the notes on it. One without the notes? Yeah. Okay. Sounds good, thanks.
Also, explaining, and there should be some sort of training, related to the workplace equity policy. I haven't followed that, there was a process where, there were some rules that were being developed for neighborhood council, and it did include, the workplace equity policy. I actually don't know where that landed. I was in a different department when they were going through that process, but that's my understanding, it's written into the rules too.
Thank you so much.
Commissioner Waddle and Commissioner Flanagan.
I echo what my colleagues have been saying, which is this is a great presentation. I think it's accomplished, at least for me, in a way that's easy to understand, a very complex environment. And that set a good foundation for what we're going to be doing going forward. So thank you very much for that. I have two questions. I'm wondering, what is the role of the personnel department? You mentioned discipline as one of many. We're also taking a look at how particularly elected officials are disciplined, but also they might be exempt roles, but not just exempt roles. What can you describe a little bit, maybe get in more of a high level way, the role of personnel and how it works with perhaps other city attorney or perhaps other roles when there is an ethical or disciplinary action from an elected official of the type that doesn't happen in the last few years?
So in terms of discipline, the personnel do not deal with discipline itself of elected officials, so that's not a role with it. What we do have a role of is, if there are complaints related to, specifically discrimination or harassment, we do have a rule, I believe it's the CAT code though, the rule that allows for the personnel department to create a special committee of investigative oversight. And so what that special committee will do is if a council member or mayor or somebody is.
Okay.
Is.
It's audio
is a
USB, or
specific-
was the one that's on? This is for that. The next.
Then it's the personnel department. You can investigate as discrimination for necessarily all of this, but if it's at the elected official level. Then the special committee would be convened, and there are people who are pre-selected, they go through a process there. And there's a structure for them, I think there's gotta be like, I think, 2 attorneys, 2, professors, legal professors, and 1, arbitrator, or it's some combination of that, and then there's a gender balance that's supposed to be in there also. And it's 5 members who would oversee the investigation being conducted by a third party. Investigators also would be on contract with the personnel department, but aside from that investigative process, there's no sort of disciplinary oversight that personnel department holds very much.
I see, so it's limited to discrimination and harassment.
And that's just investigation.
And investigation, and then, mostly corruption and other investigations would need to handle that elsewhere, it's too far.
It's not first time.
The second question is about, you mentioned you've been seeking that benchmarking with other cities, which is great to hear. I know that we would love to hear from other cities, so if there are particularly engaged people, from other cities, we might be invited to come speak with us if you suggest them. I'm wondering, much of what's in the charter today on personnel, when comparing to other cities, do those provisions appear really elsewhere? I mean, what I'm thinking is, could it be that many of the provisions belong in the LA administrative code, or some of the other places that, you identified in that song? Would that end up being a possible area of recommendation when you come back with the provision?
Yeah, I think those are possible recommendations. Other jurisdictions you do differently, for example, I believe it's the city county of San Francisco has a charter which kind of has the structure that I mentioned earlier. They have some broad rules in the charter, and then they have a charter appendix. That has details. For us, we have certain service rules that has all the details of like how hiring is carried out and all those things. It's obviously not a commission, but other jurisdictions do it differently. Some have more prescriptive rules in charter, and most of them don't. Most of them are not as prescriptive as ours.
So most of them will be higher level in terms of themes and in terms of core values, let's say. And then more of the execution of the process would be in a document that could live and breathe and possibly adjust as needed.
I believe so. Let me pull the stat specific research, for you, and I'll bring that, and I'll have it for the presentation. And identify how do we, because I know we have a lot of information, I only uploaded so much before this presentation, but we definitely have some information to bring that back to you, so you can specifically see, if we do it this way, that's a little bit different than how we do it now, what would be wild swings and what everyone else, generally does. In the sense that I have right now, it would not be a wild swing, but I'd like to tell you that evidence.
Thank you so much.
Commissioner Schneider, Sanchez, and the key commissioners, we have 5 more minutes for this presentation, and then I'll just say some closing remarks for this presentation. Commissioner Schneider.
Thank you very much, General Phillips, thank you for being here, with the weather, I'm sorry to ask a question to keep you here longer, I want you to go home and rest, so that you're ready to go back to work on Monday. I very much appreciate your presentation and your enthusiasm for, helping us, help you. It's critical to help bring the process and the charter to a post-internet world so that you can have a more expedited process. It's critical in the success and responsiveness of the city. I wanted to follow up on the question Commissioner Lewis had started regarding exempt positions. Your mention of 150, are those predetermined as they're spread out across departments? Or is that something that is
under the control of the mayor or others to deploy and redeploy. We've had conversations about the sort of authority structure here to be able to prioritize city efforts. And I know how important being able to bring staff in, especially with funding like grant funding or other funding timelines are, perhaps driving the work that needs to get done for sometimes while the exempt position is needed. So is that structured predetermined and how can it be redeployed? And are those exempt positions spread sort of proportionate to the scale of work being done across the
So yes and no, and just to clarify what I'm saying, like, it's 150, and those are the ones that could be spread, out all over, but they're not kind of determined. There are some exemptions in the charter that are like defined in the charter. The elected individuals are defined as exempt in the charter. General managers are defined as exempt in the charter. I believe 2 assistant general managers per department are defined as exempt in the charter, and there are a few other like specific defined. The other 150 is the one that's a little bit more flexible, and I think that that's kind of on a like an as needed, as requested, as approved basis. And so the personnel department, I may say, hey, I want somebody who is, I don't want to have to go through the civil service process and pull somebody from a list in order to fill this specific position because it requires a specific expertise. And if I need that, then I'll go through the process of going, to the mayor's office and then going through council to get that one approved. But there is not, I think the exemptions in the city are relatively, it can be controversial because, there is a connection to the civil service process, and the exemptions are like, those are the exceptions to the rule, those are people who don't, establish their merit in a public sense. They don't have to go through a competitive process. And it's sort of like, that's kind of where that exists, that the civil service is created, as some sort of imbalance. But on the flip side, you have, the realities that was something that, department leaders really want a lot more flexibility, and that's like the ultimate flexibility. It's just, you pick people and keep them, and they let you know if they don't work out anymore. That's a lot of flexibility, because it also allows people to, bring people in who they've identified a specific level of expertise or ability to accomplish a specific goal without saying, okay, here's my list. I don't know that any of these people have exactly what I'm looking for. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. But that's the balance. And it's certainly a balance that the feedback that I have from general managers there, strongly interested in is having some more of that.
Well, I appreciate that balance as you bring back, recommendations and what you've heard for indicating you to do that, around these values, just sort of what that, agility, responsiveness value is also integrated in there. On one side, the critical importance of, fairness and assurance of everyone's country. Real quick clarification, your slide showed budget and positions, but that didn't appear to have the proprietary departments. It's correct, though, I believe I heard from the speaker as well today, that the personnel department also undertakes the hiring for proprietaries. Is that right? So just want to make sure maybe that in the future slide or future information that's clear for the commission, because it's well, it's important to say that.
Thank you. Good, very good point. That's what DOPI report and
Thank you so very
Monica, I want to thank you for your leadership on this. This is something that this commission has to get right. This is, like many things that we're dealing with, a nexus point of many things that the city is facing right now. The inability for people to afford to live in the city of Los Angeles, which is causing black flight, which is causing flight for many people to have to live in other parts of the county that work for the city of Los Angeles. The ability for families to live themselves out of poverty. the city plays a huge role in that. This is one of the few employers, maybe the county too, where someone who doesn't get a degree, but can get a certification, go to community college, or get a skill certification, can have a job, have a career, not just a job, have a career that pays them a decent wage, healthcare for them and their family, and a secure retirement, which no one will find ever in the private sector. And the fact that people who could be on the cusp of losing their home or their apartment because they find themselves out of a job because they were laid off in the private sector cannot wait a year from applying for a job to a job where they will deliver quality public services for the residents of LA and save their livelihood. So I just want to thank you because I know your department has been thinking a lot about this, has been really thoughtful in the recommendations, and it's a win-win for everyone. It's a win for the city workforce, it's a win for the city delivering public services, and it's a win for Angelinos who can find themselves a middle-class life. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Oh, we're gonna get the next one.
Thank you.
Welcome. From our coalition of city unions beyond persecution. Can you up right now?
Before I get started, I want to thank you all for the time that you've been investing, in taking on this job. It's a huge sacrifice, and I can tell you that we very much appreciate it. My name is Lisa Belovy, and I work for the city of Los Angeles. My classification is senior librarian, and the job that I do is that I am the branch manager of the Silver Lake Branch Library. And I am here today on behalf of the Coalition of City Unions. The Coalition of LLBAs is 6 international unions. AFSCME, which is the Independent Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, by the labor groups, the International Union of Operating Engineers, Local 501, Local 721 SCIU, the LAOC Building and Trades, and the Teamsters. These unions come together in coalition to negotiate contracts with the city every 3 to 5 years. We negotiate over policy issues, including hiring side letters to our contract. The coalition also negotiated alternative local hire programs that were effective since 2017 to address test and bias, which will be reviewed in more detail later. I also want to share that these unions represent all kinds of workers in the city: librarians, arborists, doctors, 911 dispatchers, all kinds of clerical workers, Woffingers, I'm not even sure I pronounce that. Sanitation workers, crossing guards, carpenters, plumbers, you name it, we have those classifications covered by our collective bargaining agreements. Today, I'm going to talk about 3 issues. We're going to talk about the state of the city's LA workforce, the civil service structure, governance, rules of the city's civil service system and personnel policies, and fiscal planning and potential issues with multi-year budgeting framework. Let us start with the state of the city's workforce.
Thank you.
There are 48,492 full-time equivalents citywide, That makes us one of the major regional employers, and we should be considering the power of being one of the largest employers for promoting job creation. We're bigger than Kaiser, as well as the other larger private sector employers. This 48,492 positions includes all departments citywide, including departments like airports, harbor, water, and power. And of that number, 68% serve in what we call general government funded departments. Understaffing isn't because of civil service systems currently in place. The city passed its biggest budget ever this year. It took on housing the homeless. And the problem now is that funding for staff while taking on new expensive responsibilities, it's pressure on all departments, including personnel. The personnel website says that we're not hiring, but that's not accurate because there is very selective hiring still happening, especially on new departments. You can see on this chart that's from fiscal year 2008 to fiscal year 2024, there was a 15% decline in the overall number of workers for the city. Now, part of that was because of the global housing recession. And in 2015, unions negotiated a restoration of the city service workforce. And we've been slowly rebuilding, but we have not yet gotten back to where we were before the big recession. Now, this is not a city of LA specific problem. Across the nation, unions have been mobilizing to bring to attention the fact that understanding and frontline workers is really affecting the services provided to the public. Because every public sector job is a public service that we are expected to be providing to our constituents. Moving on to civil service structure, governance, rules of the city's civil service system, and personnel policies. I really love Malika Phillips' layering, and we have a similar visual here. The city charter is at the bottom of the layer of these big legal structures that create a checks and balance system to protect the public interest. The city charter is kind of like our constitution in a way. And if you think of it like a house, the charter provides the foundation of the city house. The administrative code would be the walls, and our union contracts are our roof. The city contracts and the city code are the most flexible of those three layers because the union contracts are MOUs, memorandum of understandings. They are negotiated. They are reactive to current pressures and current needs of the city and its employees. The city administrative code is also dynamic and fluid because it is set by the city council ordinance, and that's the city council voting and addressing broad ranges of issues. And then there's the city charter, our foundation, and that is set by the voters. Your job as a commission is to bring reform to the ballot, and then the city constituents will get to vote on it. So city personnel and unions do have the flexibility to modernize within. Unions are having a hard time seeing what part of the charter needs to be changed because we have noticed from the city employee perspective that there has been all kinds of modernization that has happened. Now, I just passed my 23-year anniversary working for the city. When I was hired, city personnel was a robust department. The onboarding I found to be easy. There was a lot of really wonderful training. And over the years, that department's been stretched because their staffing has been cut, their resources have been cut, and then they've been asked to do more and more. And so my question as we get here is, why are we looking at the Article 10 of the city charter? Because we have seen problems with the amount of time it takes to hire them. And we have heard on the street that people think that it's the city charter that's holding us back. But we have examples of how we have modernized and been, have been able to be fluid and dynamic in our hiring processes. And you've already heard mention of the charter and local hire. This number, that's slide. So the civil service rules that are in the city charter protect employees from political pressure. The invention of civil service rules actually started with the federal government, because what was happening was to the victor go the spoils, and people would get fired. They would clean house anytime a political, an election would change who was in office. And that system, that basic need to protect workers from, political change still exists. And it is part of really the fraud, waste, and abuse, protections that we need. Because if, an elected official can come in and totally, fire everyone, then, for their own political reasons, then you are rife for potential fraud and waste. So civil service trust, it is a merit-based system, and what merit-based means is that there is some sort of exam process. Civil service merit-based hiring and promotion seeks to remove electives from the hiring and disciplinary processes. California city workers are public servants. We are not just civil servants, we are public servants, and we are here to provide services to the public. We are required to sign up oath of loyalty, and in times of emergency, we become emergency disaster service workers. Now you might think, how would a workforce be affected by changes in political leadership? Well, we're living through it right now at the federal level. You can see what happens when somebody feels that they have the authority to fire a whole bunch of workers. And the civil service rules protect the workforce, and otherwise you have the complete havoc that you see going on in the federal level. I heard the other day, I was watching the tape of one of your recent meetings, and I heard a story that I wanted to retell from a different perspective. I heard a story saying that there was an elected who came into their city office and expected on their first day to be able to hire people, even though the staffers that were there offered to work during the transition period. And the story was that was very frustrating, and the hiring process really needed to change. Well, that is a perfect example of why you need civil service protections. People who are working in an office doing the work deserve to remain. And there shouldn't be a day one hiring process, because that would look like, even if it isn't, the perception might be that the people who could be hired in on day one are the fourth man, the person, the elected person. So nepotism and cronyism, those might be old fashioned words, but they do have modern day consequences. Right, next slide. So what do unions do, and why do unions have a place in this conversation for charter reform? Well, this is how unions work. It's important to understand that the 6 coalition unions are comprised of frontline workers who make the city work every single day. All of our city workers get a chance to elect their peers to their bargaining teams. And then there are bargaining chairs. I am the bargaining chair, for instance, of MLU 16. So since we are comprised of frontline workers, we know what's broken and we know what needs to be fixed. We also have undertaken what's called common good bargaining. Common good bargaining is when you reach out to community organizations and bring like-minded organizations who have similar goals together into one team to see how unions can forge bargaining agreements that actually help not just the workers, but the communities that they serve. You can see in the photograph on the slide, it says we're bargaining to fix LA. And underneath it are a whole bunch of those from different organizations who joined us that year to bargain for different changes in our contracts and in the way the city works. Particularly that year to rise, to help families rise out of poverty and get good paying jobs for the city. We negotiated significant solutions to change the city of the city limits, but inside the current charter by using letters of agreement and members of agreement. The workforce and service restoration agreement was to restore staffing to pre-2008 session levels with a goal to increase the cities by 5,000 jobs. So we effectuated the LOA with the creation of the targeted local hiring working group, in which we got into the weeds of specific job classifications in a training series. By 2017, the city began hiring into the targeted local hiring program. We also sought a process to address outsourced city jobs. It's an ongoing issue that I'll talk about in a minute. Now, part-time workers serve in volume in places like the recs and parks and libraries, and they suffer if they're not assigned enough hours to pay bills. I do want to say that currently collective bargaining has been the way that we have really made some important impacts on our communities. The targeted local hiring program was a way to ease job seekers into civil service jobs. It wasn't a way of getting around civil service, it was a way of introducing people into civil service in a new and a different way. We negotiated. The next slide. We negotiated the creation of the CLH program for Angelinos needing a good entry-level job by creating trainee titles similar to the Building and Trades local hire apprenticeships programs. Now, building and trades are partners to commerce, and they have had a strong historical tradition of doing apprenticeship programs during the programs. And we built on that by doing by looking at classifications within the city that we could mimic the apprenticeship program. The goal is to remove barriers to getting a city job, to accelerate department hiring for specific entry-level positions. And you might be able to see it in the outreach categories. It's hard to see. Let's see if I can hear it. Is there a way to take it here?
I could zoom in, yeah. We could do that. There we go.
Transgender individuals, older workers, disconnected youth, former gang members, as a young towns or former young towns. Designated civilians, and formerly incarcerated. That information, by the way, is available on the village website, on the city personnel website. So that working group, came about with the assistance of Jackie Holbrook, who served as the mayor's consultant. And it's one of my co-chairs from personnel department and the coalition of our unions. Members include council staff members, community who are engaged in the work. And we had continue to do outreach to the, communities who are looking to have their local servants really reflect the faces of their communities. So collective bargaining is a way of focusing on issues that are affecting communities and finding solutions by way of contracts and negotiations. Alright, so the next slide shows two of the alternative job pathways in part of the hire. This is also taken from a personal website. An office trainee can go into either office services assistant or delivery driver assistant. And rather than taking an exam and then waiting for their score to come out and being to be on a list, the first 6 months, they go through a training period, on the job training, and then another 6 months, they go through what is the more traditional probation of the civil service position. And if they complete those 12 months, then they become a full civil service employee. And then they are on track. Once they get to those yellow, the dark blue slides and the yellow slides, they have bypassed the traditional way of taking an exam, but have still met the criteria of an alternative way to be full civil service with all the rights and protections that come. Again, I work in a library, so I have seen the office training position work exceedingly well. Our checkout clerks, our administrative clerks who started off as office trainings. And as you explore the negative assumptions, I want you to know there's a lot more to it. Well, I didn't have a long time to present, but I can tell you that each library in our communities, the people who put away the books are called messenger clerks, and those positions are exempt. So that is a way to get assumptions to be used for local editing. It's not just general managers. There are additional pathways that are called blue collar career single path. So they start off being called a vocational worker, and they have 9 different pathways that they can take. Starting in the blue. And then proceeding through the general good and then eventually becoming not only civil service jobs, but capable of taking further steps up on the way. Another program after the target local hire program is up and running and running well. A new layer is added, another alternative pathway called Bridge to Jobs. And that's the different skills that then the clerical workers, it was also negotiated, with unions and the city. We negotiated for specific titles that we agreed with the city could be an appropriate, alternative pathway. Accounting clerks, communications, information representatives, inspectors, field engineering leads, maintenance and construction worker, and even civil security officer training. So these jobs, the main difference between the original program and Bridge to Jobs is that there are, it's called semi-skilled versus entry-level classifications. And then there are 2 requirements: graduation from a U.S. high school and approved certification. And I would like to take a little brief look at the civilian security officer position. It is an example of a Bridge to Jobs classification. The city is severely short on civilian security officers, and that are needed in most city facilities. These departments that can use the title include LAPD, airports, DWP, and the harbor, and I hope some in the library. The city has increasingly relied on private contract security due to the shortage of people going into these programs. And these contracts are run by LAPD. So the Bridges to Jobs program is a structural solution for understanding other than privatizing city work. Speaking Isaiah. Section 1022 is an article in the charter that talks about private contract work when the city cannot provide the work through its own workforce. When it could be performed more economically or feasibly by independent contractors. Now, right now, there's no singular body overseeing private contractor performance outside of perhaps construction projects. And so, it leaves the city open to price management when contractors know that, the city doesn't have the employees to do the work. Departments are forced to use contract services even when they rather have city employees, and again, we speak of it for like Turner and Senator who wish that we had library security officers that were, part of our team and not coming in from an outside source. And updated library's mission. But there's a simple fix to that. Apparently there is, a place on, the contract form that departments are supposed to check out. And, a simple word changing or to and would, really help with cost transparency. This is particularly important because there is no one tracking the work. Construction contracts do have public works contract administrators, but there's not a similar regulation of service contract costs and performance. It's in on one more. And lastly, we wanted to, give a little bit of input on whether or not we think multi-year budgeting is gonna work. And I get that coalition unions tend to have a 35% cycle, we negotiate with the city partner contracts. We also participate every year in the annual budget hearing process. We do understand that, there are imperfect projections for expense and revenues, and that that's always going to exist because of how many variables go into it. The city controller has an annual publishing cycle for its audited revenues and data. And the annual comprehensive financial report, and the controller also provides online live data for the city's checkbook. The CAO currently reports to council 4 times a year for budget updates. Department budget proposals are based on prior year's funding and allocations, and so the city's annual budgets already kind of have 2 years worth of data. So the question of how to make these budgets more accessible to the public has been something you've been hearing a lot about. We have experience with other city employers, unions, who use biennial budgets, and it's not been shown to us to result in more stable budgeting. What it does is lock in assumptions without the ability to respond to changed economic circumstances from one fiscal year to the next. We are in a historical moment of dramatic economic swings, so we offer observations of ways in which the city already uses 2 years of budget data every year. The coalition favors even the current annual scope schedule with process improvements. Controller financial audits of extra spending, and cycle and projections to the police, in volatile times. The budget data from the mayor's proposed budget blue books covers prior fiscal years with proposed next fiscal year, including the summary of proposed budget changes, the recapitulation of changes, the narrative of changes from prior years, and a chart of contractual service changes from the prior year, and finally position counts from the prior year. We would ask to restore what used to be a longer reading and analysis period between when the mayor's proposed budget is released and when the start of the budget hearings began. This would improve the ease of review and better accuracy in the hearing comments by offering a public data portal to download budget material into its As participants in the annual budget process, we are very familiar with the complexity of the city budget, which puts out 7 separate budget books each year. Transparency measures can be made outside of the charter process through budget and finance committee and council. So again, we're restoring the two, reading and analysis period to read. I prefer Mr. Foster's. Improve transparency and ease of document review for better accuracy and offer a public data portal before the hearings begin, so that the council and the public do not have to data scrape between 7 huge budget books. So in closing, I just want to say that although I agree with much of the personnel department's presentation earlier, the charter is our foundation. It really provides the basic employee protections. It is one of the fundamental ways that we protect the public interest and the public good. It is a function of fraud, waste, and abuse auditing. And it is really one of the basic foundations that we build upon. Any updating that we need to do for hiring processes are not minor down by the charter at all. And I am looking forward to seeing a more descriptive list of reform changes that the personnel department is going to report, because over the last few years, we have seen, during the course of my career at the city, we have seen many modernizations within personnel policies and procedures. Hiring has been modernized and has not been held back by the city charter. The charter is something that enshrines protections for workers and enshrines the way that we protect our public from potential manipulation by elected officers. So everything was like.
Commissioner Gill.
Thank you so much, and thank you for being one of those probably hundreds of people who work their day jobs in the city and also commit to their union. It's like a second job. Questions, and you've really answered some of them, but I'm sure I understand. So the Labor Coalition, you opposed the 2-year budget, right? I'm not sure I go so far as I say opposing, I just don't see the merit. Okay. You did mention, this seems kind of important, I don't know if it's in the charter or it's just custom, that the mayor's budget proposal should come sooner. So there's more deliberation time. Did I hear that correctly? There used to be more deliberation time. I'm not sure when that changed personally. But I think we all agree that we need to see those documents for longer before public hearings start and before the coalition gets to do their presentation. It's too much data to look at. And I guess part of the reason why I'm looking forward to 2 years worth of data is that twice as much information I'm going to have to go through. But it's going to be a short amount of time, even if it's fun. I hope that somehow, and with our staff, we need to know whether that mayor's deadline is charter or not. I mean, we all know the governor has a date that's in the state constitution, January 10th, gotta bring up the budget, and then the legislature has probably months to work on it. So I'd like to know more about that piece of the puzzle. And one other, well, maybe 2 questions. Did you happen to know, you were talking about the outsourcing and independent contractors, what percent of the total workforce? I haven't seen anything about that. Do you know that, or what percent of the workforce is outsourced? Yeah. I don't know that data exists. I think we probably want to know that, not necessarily, someone has to help us understand the role and the quantity of people who are independent contractors brought in under the clause that you referenced. Yes, I agree. I was glad to see this slide in the personal presentation about the percentage of exempt employees. I'm not sure it's accurate. When I do my own research with more clarity, but okay. And just for clarity, maybe this is too precise the question. Did I understand, generally speaking, from your presentation, that the labor unions feel that many of these excellent modernizations, the local hiring and et cetera, is enough, and that really there's nothing in that Article 10 that needs changing from the point of view of labor?
Well, I would start off by saying, one thing that I've heard regarding Article 10 is that it be taken out of the charter completely, and we totally are against that. It needs to be protected and kept in the charter. If there are any reforms that city personnel brings forward, we would hope that we would be having a robust discussion with the labor over those things. But frankly, the programs that we have been able to do over the last 10 years to bring people into the city workforce were in no way hindered by the charter. And again, those programs were brought together because community and frontline workers came together with city, and we worked it out. We slogged through it and figured out what we could do, and none of that process included charter reform. And yet we were able to do it. And I've got to say, I've been proud of watching city personnel evolve and do so much more and modernize and bring new, really kind of revolutionize the way the city has been functioning. It's hard to hear that they feel that there are things holding them back. I personally think that the thing holding them back is that they are under-resourced. They were one of the departments that was hardest hit during the big recession of 2008, 2009. They were one of the departments that has not fully rebounded. We're asking them to do more with less, and I know it's supposedly the way of the world, but all the departments rely on the city personnel department to do their job and do their job well.
I just want to thank you, and I'm very glad you spoke out loud. Apparently, there's a concern that this commission would be limiting reference to human resources, personnel, et cetera. I want to say for the record, I would completely oppose eliminating that. I might be open to change, but I definitely think our charter has to have content relating to employment with the city and those people and the work they do in their protection. So thank you. I hope you'll be back when we have the meetings.
Sure, yeah.
I'm wondering about, the point we were just touching on, I think you're aware of other cities that have in their charter similar personnel, details, and, you know, it could be something that maybe we come back to, or perhaps we talk about in the community. But that's a piece that I think would help, I believe, me and maybe others on the commission just understand, how each fits together, and, possibly even keeping in substance many of the very same things, but just finding the right place for them to, keep things efficient.
I have not done that research yet, and I think it would be worth looking at how other governments of our size handle that. If you look at the civil service rules, which are online, Article 10 of the charter is copied into it as an appendix. So there are many layers to the rules that govern how employees make their way through their city careers. But you might have heard that a simple fix would be to pull it out of the charter and put it into the admin code. And what that does is makes that piece of legislation extremely vulnerable to manipulation. And the reason why it's in the charter is because the charter is most of the people. And it protects the people who work for the city, and it protects the public interest. So to pull it out of the charter, that has only changed by the vote of our constituents, and put it into the admin code, they're going to change, frankly, day to day, if they wanted to, by the city council. We really upend the entire purpose of
civil service codes.
Yeah, I think I understand the position. I'm just trying to compare this to what other like similar cities with very similar concerns are doing. So to get that piece of information, to put it all into context would be helpful.
And then all that they reach out to, because I already into all international units, which means they work across the country on the same issues. Spoke at the state assembly about understanding. And so it's been a nationwide concern. Why is it so hard to get people into these bigger jobs? When you have bigger jobs in the one, very strictest fiscal pieces. But staffing front lines has been an issue across the country. So I imagine there probably is access to all kinds of data about where the civil service schools are kept. In different kinds of also government prosecution. No, to you. I have remembered that.
Commissioner Shires. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, Commissioner, yeah, good questions. Appreciate your presentation today, and in particular, just one point I wanted to comment on this question. You spoke about the TLA to Bridge to Jobs programs as really ways that you bring people into the civil service system, not circumventing that system, and I thought that was a great way of depicting that there's really a common interest between the union interest and those, including as outlined by General Manager Phillips, who want more agile, effective, city response to the various needs out there. So do you have at your fingertips to have the data on like how many target level hires we've been able to bring in, or how many positions, various jobs have been able to fill? And if not, maybe we could just get that at a later date, but if you had it, it's
It's significant. I wonder, is there any pencil on the river money for that off the top of their head?
maybe we could just flag to get that. But if it's a committee to, thank you. Commissioner Thomas.
Hello, thank you. I am a proud member of California Faculty Association, so I appreciate the work that you're doing. I'm interested in terms of the local hires. Sometime back, I don't know, maybe 5 years ago or even longer, there was this discussion about local hires with unions, and again, I'm gonna be a broken record in terms of Black folks. And because of what's happening in the unions as well, and it continues to happen in unions in terms of there are no Black, very few. And so, I'm looking for some numbers. I'm interested in finding out how are these local areas being highlighted. Like for example, if my understanding of local hiring is correct, which would be consistent with what I was aware of when people were pushing for it. You choose a particular area of the city and you recruit from that area. That was the notion. And so the other question is if we're talking specifically about racial demographics, then we have to kind of figure out, well, where do Black people live? Or where do these pockets of people, where do they exist? And so I'm very interested in getting the numbers. Like I wouldn't know how many Black people work for the city. I wouldn't know who they are. I don't know how old they are, not names, I'm saying. Not names. Even though I probably go to the city and alley myself on 2 hands almost. But I wanna know, where they come from. What's their background? What's their educational level? And I want to juxtapose that to the other words, because something is wrong. Something is wrong in terms of the union. In the way that these hires are happening or not. And something is wrong as it relates to the city. And if we are reforming the charter, it should be good for everyone. And we cannot assume that because we are a diverse city, that would be automatic by, and it's just not, it's gotta be intentional. Because we have seen a wave of what is referenced as BIPOC anti-blacks. And so, and I guess you could suggest that even there's anti-blackness within the Black community. But it's a serious problem, and I look to the unions, especially, I put more pressure on the unions than I said, because, because I imagine that they would understand. And so if you could, if that data exists, I would love to see it. I would love to see the number of Black folks and that work for the city, and where they come, like what demographic areas, what areas of the city that they come from. And then also educational background, and juxtapose that with the majority of people who work for the city. I just want to see that, because I think in the Black community in particular, people are very frustrated by what they see, and maybe it's a perception. Maybe I'm wrong. I know I'm not, but I'm open to be wrong. But I think that's the kind of information that we need from the city. The next question is participatory budget. We talked a lot about budgets, and the reality is that if the mayor's budget isn't consistent with what the people say they want, then what good is it? And there is a process whereby the people have played a major role in the second people's budget. I don't know if you're familiar with, but they surveyed more people than I think anybody ever in the history of Los Angeles in terms of a budgeting process. And yet this is kind of downplayed and poo-pooed as if this is not some of the best data we have. And my speculation is that the reason that is because it primarily is speaking to some of the same people that I keep advocating for. And so I would like for that process to be considered. And I would hope that a participatory budgeting process, not just as it relates to city agencies or unions, but that the unions would play a major role in making sure that the community has a voice, that the people have a voice in terms of the way that the budget is determined. My last question about budgeting is that police take up a lot of city budget, a lot. And I'm just surprised that, and I know the data on this. Unlike some people, I know the data on police, and they don't deserve the money that they get. And so, because if you're not doing a good job, you shouldn't be getting increases, right? That's what happens in every other. Personnel has been cut. Every other city agency primarily has been cut. But when it comes to policing, they find a way to get an increase. And so that piece, and I didn't get to address this with, I don't know if it's told me it's not necessarily a part of this personnel kind of discussion that we're having, but it is in fact related. Because when it comes to cutting programs and services that uplift people and that result in poverty reduction. We don't need that money going to police, and so I need somebody, you know, in the city. I think it would be appropriate for unions to look at the percentage, the percentage of increases that policing get, and the deductions that most other social service agencies in the city get, and how could cutting or putting policing in the same, looking at them in the same way they do any other city agency, meaning having budget cuts. Dealing specifically with this corruption in terms of policing who are filing or getting multiple lawsuits filed against them, and then that impacting the money that the city has. And so I'd like to see all of that in this discussion. I don't know if you understand what I'm saying.
Okay. And one of the things that unions have the flexibility to do that, the city perhaps doesn't, is we do spend a lot of time talking to our members. So our members are people who are already employed, right? They all have relatives and families, and they all have needs. And every time we're about to go into negotiations, we survey that. How are you? Where are you? Where do you live? Why do you live so far away? What are your dreams for your family? And we know how to organize, meaning we know how to bring people together and fight and talk. And talk and fight. And that's what it takes sometimes, right? To get to the root of the problem. Is to bring people together from different perspectives and hash it out. And that was one of the ways that these two alternative pathway programs started. It was a task force that brought together different segments of the population and different community organizations, and then just worked it out. Like the looking at was identifying neighborhoods that needed to be looked at. So this work can be done. The coalition of unions is always open to working with the city on problem solving, whether it's ideas for increasing revenue, balancing a budget, just making our communities better. Because people who choose to go into the public service, they do it because they have a heart for public service. They are good jobs, they have good benefits, but working for the public takes a special person. And so we have that in common with each other. So unions who have public sector workers in them know how to find those people who have that mission already in their heart to get in and talk about problems in real talk, which is what you're trying to bring this through.
Exactly, and I think we can, I guess that, for me, you know, I think we can solve.
We're a little bit over time, but continue with your last.
Yeah, the point is that we are one of the most diverse places in the world. Diverse ideas, ethnically diverse, I mean, you name it. We aren't able to get this right. We aren't able to get this right, and we need to be intentional about it. And that's from elected officials all the way down to the folks that walk the beat. We ought to be able to get this right, and that's really my passion. That's where I'm speaking from. We cannot leave people behind, and we know that under the current political environment, if we ain't Donald Trump and his family, he don't care about us. And so this is an opportunity for us to really get this right. And so thank you for responding. I appreciate you so much. You're a librarian. I love librarians. But thank you so much.
Oh, we look forward to coming back and continuing to work together. Thank you.
All right, we have Jack up next from our neighborhood budget advocates.
I got that, but it's not. Yeah, I think that will. Okay, yeah, or, yeah.
Now it's if you need.
If you need a.
Exactly. Yeah. My name is Jack Uncle. I'm the very well affiliated, very well with council.
If members of the public could please take any side conversations outside, please, we would appreciate it. Thank you so much. Thank you, Jeff.
I did a budget advocate for all of that, like, I've been following the city budget for about maybe 20 years. I've written a number of articles on the city budget or the lack thereof. So I think that's very familiar with what's going on. I'll be here against the sheriff, but he has been for let's begin. Right, since you came on this administration. But we like to think that we've got some level of knowledge about the city budget. I have a handout here from I don't want to go away from the president. The second page is basically the current situation that we're in. From my perspective, the budget for serious issues facing the city. It resulted in underfunding of safety and our matter of fact, so bad. Excuse me.
If members of the public could please take their conversations outside, the commission would appreciate that.
But you know, it's so bad, the city back in June was there to take an emergency because of declining revenues and increasing liabilities. This last year, we all went about $1 billion shortfall that had fund. That resulted, they finally got the budget, but resulted in a lot of layoffs, starting at 1,641, 1,600 going down to 600. Probably a few of those have been laid off, and a few more of those have been eliminated. City telling us they have a balanced budget. I don't think so. I think it's an unbalanced budget. The reason I say that is very simple. If they underestimated number of expenses, including usual overtime and other things that the sworn departments come with, litigation expense budget is 187 million. This year it's going to be about 330. So I think if $30 million, then it will be 30, 40 million judgments against the city. The reserve fund is in pretty sorry shape. Yes, they said it was at 5% minimum. Quite frankly, they're going to be bringing the reserve fund coming to this funding the status report as the revenues, increase. Put another way, look at what's going to happen to tourist business. You're not seeing too many Chinese and Mexican or Canadians for that matter. So the tourist numbers are way off, and that's what impacts sales, sales taxes and some of the other seven economically sensitive things. Next year, the CAO is predicting a $90 million shortfall. And I think there's some optimistic assumptions in that. Probably more importantly, I outlined this in, I outlined this is a goal. Over the next 4 years, we're looking at a structural deficit of basically over $600 million. And while the CAO says it's going to be about 500 plus, it's going to be about 600 negative when you adjust for the future regular fees. They don't, there's no consideration in the 4 years budget for future labor decision. Look at some of these numbers in the page, you'll see that it'll go from a $500 million surplus or CAO to over $600 million in the hole. So that's still a problem, and they just don't do anything about it. We have deferred maintenance of over $10 million. Streets, sidewalks, parks.
clean water, IT, buildings, facilities, I mean, they're a mess. We have unfunded pension liabilities of over $7 billion, and that's based on optimistic assumptions, including the investment rate assumption of 7%. Many people that know what the hell they're talking about think it should be 4, 5, 6%. That includes, if somebody would say Uncle Warren Buffett, who's been known to make a couple of dollars in the stock market, so I think he got some pretty good numbers there. We also don't have any money for capital projects. Think of the LA River. Think of the convention center, the $2.7 billion for the convention center. Look at the civic center that they want to build downtown, that's $5 billion. Think of, I think there's a new, thing for the Parks and Needs Assessment out there, and they want $15 billion. And then you think of, then you have drinking water, and that's an $8 billion liability. So, I think all this comes down to is the real lack of trust in the city. You look at what's been going on last year, we have the Murray Martinez issues, where, Murray, two of them members of the city council chatting with the head with the LA Fed about, basically, the conversation with the city council. We had 3 guys going to Clint Jose, Mitch Engleberg, and Matt Margaret and Thomas, and the 4th one, Colonel Price is on. I think you got this at what second, yeah, his second. So, we have a real level of trust that we have in the city, and I hope hopefully, and that's one of the reasons that I think this charter commission has been formed. It was a direct result of all these things going on, especially in Murray Martinez. I'm going to let Jay take the next 2.
We can also here talk about how bad things are. People are supposed to be sitting here talking about it today, is how do we make it better? That's really the problem with that. Yes, there is a lack of confidence. The city controller has put forth 6 recommendations. Give the controller an independent budget. It's hard to audit when you have no money and you have no personnel. You just can't do it. Designate the controller as the city's CFO. It's an idea. Do we have a chief financial officer in the city? Not yet. It's all broken. 18 members get to issues that all your issues. And everything ends up going into a different budget. It ends up costing us services. The budget advocates have said from day one, are you interested in the budget? And most people don't know. Are you interested in the services you don't receive anymore? And everybody goes, yes. That's the nexus. The budget equals the services. It's that simple. Require minimum qualifications for the control. That's a really great idea. Maybe someone who actually knows what they're doing and can dig into a book of $13 billion business. That's what this is. This city is a $13 billion business. Okay. Clarify the controller's audit authority, including performance audits of all city programs that are sourced from the new city tax dollars. So the example here is the safe housing program. Okay. The controller is not allowed to audit it because the mayor won't allow it. The mayor said face to face to us at the Western Regional Alliance meeting a month ago. I don't want another elected official auditing another elected official. Somebody forgot this tax dollars. See, these are stakeholder tax dollars. Everything should be audited. Okay, blocking the controller from being able to audit the program tells me there's something wrong in that program. It's that simple. But he should be given the control, and that needs to be in the charter. That needs to be specified in the charter. Allow the controller to hire outside counsel. City attorney does a good job, but we have people out there that can do better jobs under certain circumstances. And the controller should be able to, under certain circumstances, especially when you're talking about fraud, waste, and abuse. They should be able to have an independent attorney firm working with them. Rick Cole, before he left the city, made a lot of recommendations. Next slide. I'm not my mother, my body's going. The city manager. City needs a city manager. Take it out of the hands of 15. Get somebody in there that can make objective decisions, not local decisions. Again, the CFO, mentioned before. 2-year operating budget, well, we heard the union leader say, you don't believe in a 2-year budget. 1-year budgets are a disaster. They don't work. They've proven they don't work. Multi-year budgets have to have minimum 2-year forecast. Realistic forecast. A 5-year capital plan. When you saw that other slide and you see that we're about $20 billion in the whole on infrastructure and capital improvements, what does that tell us? Well, my new mantra is under every broken sidewalk, there's a broken city. And that's where we're at right now. Our city is broken, and we need to fix it. And you guys are charged to fix it. You guys are charged to make the hard decision. And I do envy you for having that position. Most people would say, I don't envy them. This is tough. I do, and if you actually make those decisions. Control and independence. Again, when the mayor can say, you can't look at my votes, what's the point of having a control? Doesn't matter. If the CAO is doing the forecast and the controller doesn't get it until the end of the 3rd quarter, what's the point? So there has to be some independence in that office. And then again, listening to, personnel and unions, there has to be civil service reform. Okay, but it's not all civil service reform. We've had this conversation with personnel. And the big view is always the fact that we do slide rule cuts when we get in trouble. 10% across the board, everybody take a 10% cut. Well, it takes personnel 18, 24 months to recruit when times get better. They have nobody to do the hiring. So they're way behind the curve. That has to change. And quite frankly, there were a way in the charter to stop the slide rule cuts. Because we cut departments that are revenue generating. Where does that make sense? We're broke, we need money, so let's cut everybody 10%. Doesn't mean that we don't get more money than we need. That is my end of the COO and CAO. Which page are you on? 5. Okay. And then I'll get back. Yeah.
Then in terms of what the attitudes have been writing white papers for the last 10 to 15 years, can have our basic recommendations. This last year, we came up with 7 recommendations for charter reform that relates to the budget. The first is that the 4-year general fund outlook needs to be updated to reflect anticipated various between employees. Now I'll get into that later on. But basically, what happens is that these labor agreements aren't accounted for in the budget, so everything else becomes pretty relevant. The exact opposite. We'll see on the following chart that the CAO numbers, which we anticipated $500 million surplus over the next 4 years. When you adjust it for labor contracts, it's only $600 million in the whole. And that's some pretty generous assumptions. So I think the CAO needs to update the 4-year budget outlook to reflect considering the rate. Just put a plug number in it. Quite frankly, the other thing about it is by having a plug number in there, it would show that the city doesn't have the money to finance these budgets. We talked about 2-year budget cycle as recommended by the city controller. It was also recommended by the LA 2020 committee. They want 3 years. You'll find that a number of other cities, go out there 2, 3, 4, 5 years. The city is, a $13 billion revenue organization. It's 34 people. It has 30,000 people, not including prior care departments, and that is about 50,000 people overall. So it's a huge enterprise. This is, but you have 50,000 people that you have to manage, and that's going to take a budget. We also call for open, transparent labor negotiations that require, significant outreach actually moving forward during and after. That doesn't mean you're sitting in the bargaining room, but we ought to be able to want to know what the goals of the city. We need to know what's going on during the negotiation, not that we're in. And finally, they ought to give us some time to review it. What happens now is, they have negotiations between the EERC, the Executive Employee Relations Committee. They come to an agreement, goes to the Personnel Committee, the next day it goes to the City Council, and it's approved, and there's very little discussion about it. I was at one personnel meeting, and I said to Mr. Karatz, said, can you think about this? He said, look, the budget, it's in the council file. There's 2,000 pages of, very dense labor agreements. And, I think that was pretty smart on some of these things. But, I put it there and find it in the city fund notes. I think the other thing is that we'd like to have to put a measure in the ballot to prohibit the city from entering into any labor contracts that are going to create a deficit. That's happened in 2023, happened in 2009. Every 3 or 4 years we get sued. So, going into a deficit where you have, basically an unfunded mandate, isn't very good financial practice. But just want to know what's going on. It's not like, well, just look what happened with the $1 billion shortfall. A big chunk of that was as a result of 2 years labor agreements. We also call for a long-term infrastructure plan. I would say also a financial plan. But, Jay was saying about that earlier, we have, $10–20 billion of unfunded mandates or capital projects that the city would like to do. And there's just no money here. Quite frankly, I've been to a couple meetings last week on our needs assessment. And they want about $250 million a year in general fund revenue, and they have a $15 billion capital budget, for $2.5 billion is deferred. Where the hell's that money come from? I think we also calling for a reserve fund, like a real reserve fund, real rainy day fund, as opposed to a working capital. What they do now is when there's a little bit of a shortfall, we'll probably see that in the first financial status report, is when they're short, they raise the reserve fund. If budget deficit is not an emergency, what's going to happen when we have an earthquake? What happens when we have the next fire? What happens when we include who the hell knows? Well, guess what? The hell knows what's going to happen. But they have something to resources. Manage this. The final one is we want to figure sustainability. The hopes of the budget, the important in real time, not looking at it. That's what we're going on. And make recommendations to the mayor and city council and also keep us informed. It's not like they have a veto, but the Office of Transparency, the accountability for the controller. He's not like they have a veto, right? We'd like to know what the hell's going on. So those are our 7 recommendations. I think they're fairly reasonable. I don't think they take a lot of heavy lifting. I think they seem very logical. But with that, I guess moment. I'm sorry. I don't want. No, sorry.
We're gonna come back on Jack and budget questions real quick, but I have a couple of items on Charter Section 900 that I want to talk about very quickly. And it's not there, but it should. Okay. There's a lot of confusion about neighborhood councils. Okay, our budgets are in the same. Right now, we're at $25,000. We used to be at $50,000. There's no rhyme or reason to what the city decides to be neighborhood council. It's almost like they're trying to get about business. Something needs to be in there to mandate a place in the county. If you want to keep neighborhood councils, you gotta keep them afloat. And something has to be in the charter to say, in every budget, they're gonna get X amount of dollars, however you guys figure out where it's coming from. Number 2, we believe that every single commission should have a neighborhood council member on it as a non-voting member. Let us see how the sausage is made. Don't just invite me to dinner. We need to know what's going on beforehand, not when it's too late. When a neighborhood council submits a CIS, that was supposed to be a big deal for us. Except when we go to council and we try to talk about it, they stick us in general public and give us a minute or 2. We're supposed to see 5 minutes, it should be codified. They said you get 5, it should be codified.
And these are little things that you can do very easily on in the charter. We should be allowed to communicate with other jurisdictions. Currently, we're not allowed to. Although if you look at any neighborhood council meeting, you'll see representatives from state senate, state assembly, LA County, they're all there, and they're all listening. I recognize they're not allowed to give a position, that's the council jurisdiction. But telling us we can't communicate with them is just coming wrong, completely wrong. And last, neighborhood councils, you guys need to decide on neighborhood council members, elected officials, volunteers, unpaid employees, it's like three categories. And no one has ever had the guts to stand up and say what neighborhood council people are. Okay, when they want us to be volunteers, they tell us we can't do this. When they want us to be elected officials, they mandate 5 trainings. Okay, it's all nonsense. Okay, it's a game of bait and switch with us. So these 5 things for Charter Section 900 are recommendations that I would ask you to really take a serious look at. Not so hard to make decisions like this. Jack.
Mona, you have a question? It's so strange you would have a question.
I'm famous for that. Thank you both, not just for being here, this very nice clear presentation, but for the decades of commitment to our city. A couple of really specific questions. I'm just curious, the budget advocates that you represent today, does that include someone from every one of the 99 neighborhood councils, or who are you representing?
Each neighborhood council has 3 representatives. The represent each, and there are 12, we have 12 districts throughout the city. So give or take, there's 36 per district. We get together on budget day and those reps elect the budget advocate. We have 3 budget advocates for the 12 regions of the city. So there's 36. We're not fully staffed, but yes, everybody has the opportunity to participate.
Thank you. And specifically, I'm just curious on I learned a lot, very interesting about the role of the controller. I'm going to say, I have gotten a ton of written comment, people supporting the controller's, suggestions. I kind of agree with the mayor. Let me ask you this. What about if the controller were to audit the departments, but some outside auditors were employed to audit all the electeds? I mean, to me, that makes more sense than having one elected audit other electeds. I don't know. I'm just asking your opinion.
I'll give you again, a specific example is, the state housing program. Okay, in the conversation with the mayor, where she said she wouldn't allow another elected to audit her program. We then asked, well, do an independent audit. Go to an outside firm who bring in an independent auditor. To which she replied, well, I have an audit. And we said, send it to us. Well, it wasn't an audit. It was far from an audit. Okay, so it's flawed. Basically, it's flawed. So someone has to have the authority to say, I'm bringing in an independent auditor to audit that program. And again, that would probably have to be the controller because they do audits. So it makes sense for the controller to say, we're gonna hire an independent auditing firm to come in and look at this program and give a report back to the city. So we're not looking for an elected to do it. It's not like mandate, but someone has to do it. You can't just spend taxpayer dollars and not have any accountability.
Thank you.
I think in terms of outside audits and so recently, that was mandated by Judge Carter on the home situation for the county and city. That audit cost about $3 million by the time they got through with it. But it was a very, very professional job by Al Reyes and myself. And they're an internationally recognized firm. And they had a good time. That was not favorable for the county or for the city. But I think if you're going to bring in outside auditors, every time you have to go through an RFP, you're going to have to, who you're going to consult with. I think a lot of the people that are on the city list are, I don't think it's qualified, simple as that, I think that they're put on there, for political reasons.
Commissioner Yap.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you for this presentation. You raised some very important issues. Many of them, standard practice in other organizations. It also follows very important issues of funding and money and access towards recommendations that are very tangible. My question is about the budget itself, and I'm frankly stunned at the forecast claim that we are as well. But I want to make sure that I understand it.
Page 6.
So this is, in 2030, there will be a cumulative surplus, according to the CAO, of 600 million. And then, which as you point out, don't include labor contracts, which I expect that just on your analysis, these labor numbers, these labor contract numbers, these are not contingent, these are agreed upon increases, is that way?
In here, yes,
Yeah.
it's just existing contract, no consideration for future contracts, which begin in January of 2007.
Okay, thank you. So this would mean then that, as you did point out, taking into account just those labor contracts, a cumulative 625 million liability that is not accounted for in the CAO number.
That's correct.
So that would effectively take the cumulative in the CAO, that's basically down to near zero or 25 million.
What do you mean near zero?
So the surplus that's showing in the CAO line
Right there?
at 599
Yeah.
would be minus the 625.
No, the 625 would be the total it's not a difference, that's the total shortfall.
It's the total shortfall, so that's really a swing of $1.2 billion.
Bingo, yes.
Okay, that's helpful. I wanted to make sure that I understood that and hopefully our commission understanding. That the distinction of, based on labor contract commitments that are not reflected in the CAO forecast. Is a swing of $1.2 billion.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Now, these are the numbers right here that I calculated. And I assume the 4% increase in these things. And 4% also includes, cost of pension, healthcare, all sorts of other goodies that are there. And, it's 3% or 4%, right? It's 4%, right? I don't know. What I would say is, I want the CAO to do those numbers. Come on, let's go out there. And they refuse to do it. Quite frankly, one of the things I like it is one, it tells you what they're dealing with. But it's also a message to the union negotiators, the labor negotiators, the ERC, that there ain't no money there. They continue to go out and continue to run from mandates. So it gets a little complicated, but those are, you'll see, those compound year after year. So for example, 59 million, next year it's 146, the total is $205 million. So,
yeah. Okay, thanks so much for clarifying that.
Commissioner Schreiber. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for inviting on this presentation. I think it was something that you suggested at an earlier meeting, and I'm glad you're able to be here today. Two quick questions. One, you raised this topic of the reserve fund. And the city does have a budget stabilization fund, which is meant to kind of adjust for the, the standard ups and downs of the marketplace, if you will. And, but you're calling for sort of a more traditional, restrictive, emergency fund. And I guess I would just invite further input from you on this about how those two may coexist. Are you looking at a particular ratio? Is the budget stabilization fund, can that coexist with your view of the emergency fund? And sort of at what ratio would you put either or both of them? And
you know, I'm not predetermining that this is really appropriate necessarily for a charter, but I do think it is something for us to consider. And so you can speak more to it now, but also invite further input.
The reserve fund, there's, I think the charter is a minimum of 5%. The budget stabilization fund is also in the charter. And when the city calculates its reserves at the beginning of the year, they talk about the budget the reserve fund, the budget stabilization fund, and also the unappropriated balance. Unappropriated balances, I do not consider reserves, other than you can draw on which you go down through the year. The reserve fund, the minimum is 5%. The goal has been 10% general fund revenues. So an $8 billion budget, that means they did $800 million, you know, in the reserve fund. I think now it's about 5%, and that's stretching it because it ain't gonna be there for long. So, you know, that 5%, which would be around $400 million, $410 million, a little bit more than 5%. But that's for the time being. The thing that gets me is, you know, they use the reserve fund as a piggy bank. You know, there's some cost overruns or whatever the hell happens, and there's a deficit. You have too much overtime from the police or the fire department, or you have whatever the heck it may be. You know, they tap the reserve fund. That's like going into your retirement fund. You know, the financial groceries from my perspective. You know, we need a reserve fund that's a truly reserve fund, so when the, you know, when the spaghetti meatballs hit the fan, you know, we have the reserves. You know, whether it was, you know, whether it's fires or earthquakes or, you know, whatever, it's another grocery, for example.
So am I hearing you, because I do think it makes sense for both types of funds, one to just manage natural fluctuations, and one to be there in time of an emergency. And are you suggesting that 5% is the appropriate number for pure emergency?
No, actually 10%. CAO's goal, you know, 10% of the general fund. I mean, you know, if the spaghetti meatballs hit the fan, $800 million, we're gonna get you a whole hell of a lot. Then we don't get you more, much further forward. But the budget stabilization fund is basically another mechanism where if revenues exceed a certain grow over a certain percentage, that excess, or a good chunk of that excess, goes into the budget stabilization fund. This last year, I think they hit the, I'm not sure what the budget stabilization fund, but I want to say $34 million.
Yeah, thank you very much. So one other topic, changing the issue. The speaker earlier today referenced liability payouts. Do you have any opinion about how liability payouts should be appropriated in future budgets? Like, how should it be allocated across in a different way than they are now?
That's a lot of things going on. First of all, it's very tough to go, you know, budget for liability payments. And it's getting doubly tough given the impact of what I'll call runaway juries. The thing that they could do, they, the government, is to have tort reform up what's happening now. Where, you know, you read these, you know, people, you know, I read something the other day, somebody kept the city off for $40 million. You know, those are, you know, I good negotiation, but you know, a lot of us, you know, the aggregate damages, let's say, are $5 million, let's say, well, we can $35 million because of whatever reason. So you have one is tort reform. The second is, you know, getting a handle on what's going on. I think a lot of it depends on one, probably fixing the infrastructure over time. A lot of the budget issues are triple falls. You have a number of employment issues where, you know, somebody feels like they're being harassed or discriminated against. So you have a lot of those. And then you have the cops. You know, there's been a lot of, you know, department issues. Those have been fairly significant. And one of the things people talk about is actually putting that into the budget. You know, yeah, supposed to be related costs. You know, they'll say, you know, you have this year, I think the deficit's going to go, the agency's going to be close, $300 million next 2026. But, you know, and I think you can, they put that below the line. That's not the budget. Is that with part of the budget, I think they might have a little bit different view.
So last year, it was approximately $500 million. Of that $500 million, $200 million was public works issues. Of the public works issues, I think it was $183 million was tripping falls, trees crashing on cars, it was all infrastructure thing. So if you want to eliminate $500,000 worth of problems, you start with public works. And you fund public works correctly. You know, which 1 year's out of one tree trimming, 1 year's out of one sidewalk repair, we're broken. And we're gonna continue to pay off these debts rather than actually fix the streets and sidewalks. If we did it once and for all, we'd be clean. As far as LAPD goes, I followed this for the last 20 years. Item by item, complete breakup. How much of it is internal, where you have officers feeling they've been harassed or biased or whatever, and suing and getting a lot of money from the city. You have car crashes that are inevitable when you have chases, you know, and maybe that's something the department has to look at, how they move that forward. And then you have use of force, you know, the number of use of force. So when you look at use of force and you look at car crashes, you're looking at systems in the department. Well, I think it's completely true that if you deem the department's actual budget, some of that stuff will get fixed from the top down. So this is systemic problems happening from the top down. They can be fixed. Okay, but it just doesn't seem like there's a lot of political will to go in there and do it at this point. But that's how you're trying to fix that. Have $1 billion worth of debt that we rack up on a pretty regular basis.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Commissioner Murray.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. While we're talking about the infrastructure, do either of you gentlemen have a position on Board of Public Works?
I do. I think you ought to get rid of it. I think it's a political slush. They got 5 people there, making whatever number of dollars it is. It doesn't seem to me that any of those commissioners know, they don't know a lot about public works. Public works is a $2 billion operation with 5,000 employees. You know, streets, street lights, and sanitation. There's a whole, you know, it's a very complicated operation. And I don't think any of these people know what the hell they're talking about. So I think you have it.
All right, let's give our presenter a round of applause.
If any of you have any questions about him, any questions about these numbers, feel free.
Thank you, Jack.
Thank you, Justin. Thank you, Max and Jeff.
Commissioners, can I have a motion?
Of course, thank you.
File our presentation. So, motion by Commissioner Andres, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Fuentes, is there any objection? All right, seeing none, receipt is filed. Okay, I want to, we had a number of commissioners, discuss, additional items we'd like to see, specifically additional data from competitors to have to follow up. I have asked that the commission receive, sort of a budget 101 on the timeline, and so Mona will get you the question on the manner, what's in the charter, the timeline, and also just understanding more detail what the practices are, for the budget and how all the different city aides interact with it. Also want to open it up if there are any other future items or presentations that commissioners would like to put forward.
Commissioner Aguirre, I'd like to talk in the next session about possibly amending the bylaws.
All right, we will put that on the agenda for the next meeting. Commissioner Schreiber.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify for all the commissioners and the audience, there was a speaker earlier in the day that said that, as you're soliciting these topics, which we've had before, and, you know, suggestions to be able to agendize future topics, there was a speaker that said they had to put forth a motion. And I wanted to just have your clarification for the audience about whether that's what we're doing here, or are they, is the audience expecting that we have to have a motion that everybody votes on, as then course comes forward? Maybe you could just clarify for the sake of, for the sake of hearing the comment in this meeting, thank you.
I appreciate that, so it's your turn also to, I don't know if you were gonna talk about this, but before, what I would like to say is that, I think this, if I recall correctly, this was related to various topics around, LAPD oversight. And that in the current committee structure, there was not explicitly, called out a few organizations that have reached out to the executive director on this topic. In general, personnel, including PD, would fall within this committee. But I think there is an interest from some advocates to have that more explicitly called out within the committee structure, which is not, so that would require a motion. But let me do this, let me, I don't know if the attorney want the approach to adding on this.
Well, it's pretty much the content of the question was also, whether something falls under a particular committee.
So in terms of what falls under the committee, we haven't deal with it specifically, but I'm happy to talk with the executive director about what the subject matter jurisdictions of the committee are, and we have to analyze specifically regarding that. In terms of the presentations, the chairman controls the agenda unless there is an action by the body to add something to it. I typically construe what you're doing as a sort of an implicit motion passed without objection. But if you want to make it formal, you can have a motion second and vote to make it very clear. I think if chairman faces it without objection and nobody says anything, that would be more than sufficient.
Thank you. So my interpretation, and for the sake of the audience, it is that this idea of a motion, we are effectively doing that by raising our suggestion. And it is up to the chair and the executive director and the committee chairs to manage how those may then spill out into actual agendas.
Yes, and I think if the chair says without objection, it has motion and it will land on a future agenda, right?
And in the case of the police personnel issues, we have effectively a working interpretation that falls under these issues. And I think unless other commissioners feel differently, we're following the lead of the chair in that interpretation, and to be working with committee chairs to make sure that we're covering all products. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I'm wondering if the CAO is on the calendar of because I'm just thinking that we've been hearing that World Couple of Worlds will present and St. not even invested, so CAO is I know control of the deal becoming it would be great to hear from the CAO too.
Yeah, I had a conversation actually with their team yesterday at the CEO's office with me and Matt, and we have a couple of dates in mind that they're working on. We've been discussing and having conversations with the CAO before this commission was formed about their participation when they come to actually present. So we've almost got that very long, and they will also be contributing in a lot of other ways as we really dig in. They have expertise across the city on various topics, from infrastructure, budgeting, just really across personnel, etc. Across, so they'll be kind of letting some additional support from that way as well. But yeah, we've almost got a date for the CAO to do something.
That's good to hear. I'm just realizing that we're hearing about leaders' roles and CAO comes to mind, city attorneys, and I think both of those.
Absolutely.
So it's not, thank you.
Speaking of which, I know I think I mentioned before, including the 101 on budget was also including that 101 just on the charter. And you know, this section works this way, this is what this section does, etc. Commissioner Flannery.
Awesome. This was mentioned earlier, but in terms of the rest of the committee schedules, when can we expect this to be done? So,
The executive director and I are going to schedule a meeting of the chairs, hopefully within the next 2 weeks would be ideal. So that the chairs could, put forward what their schedule would look like, but as far as government structure, that committee is the one that's moving forward, but we look forward to providing that within the next 2 weeks.
one follow-up question, I know Commissioner Yap already brought up, bylaw revisions. Would that include the window for public comment for these meetings, if we were to adjust that?
So, it's on the bylaws, and, one of the reasons it's on the bylaws is so for the city, there's no cutoff, we don't have a cutoff technically for, public comment. It's still rolling in, the difference for what is perceived as a cutoff is when it gets bundled consented, but that's just based on time, these meetings shift at time. You know, I'm not gonna ask staff to, at 7 AM in the morning, so it takes a lot of time to, to get an eligible document to redact, because a lot of people like to put their home addresses and phone numbers into these things, and we shouldn't share that publicly, but it takes a lot of time, so it's just gonna be variable. And then if somebody, drops a public comment, at 9 AM this morning, it's just gonna be rolled into the next, batch of public comment, so there's really the cutoff.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense, I appreciate the clarity, only because the public is asked about that every time, so that's helpful.
Commissioner Field.
Just, a request to staff, if possible, not at City Hall, because we all know where it is, we all know where to park. If we're coming out to these places, could we get those logistical details a day or two ahead?
Sure.
Thank you.
No problem, sorry. Any other closing comments from commissioners? All right, seeing none, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Is there a second? So, right, without objection, we are doing the deal one.